Chapter 230. For the past month, cultivators rushed over endlessly from outside the primordial ruin upon hearing the news. On one hand, it was because there seemed to be an ancient treasure within the ruin. On the other hand, the primordial ruin was way too attractive for many cultivators. The ancient battlefield was a secret ground left behind from the ancient era and formed its own dimension. Even the ancient battlefield attracted many cultivators, let alone a mysterious place left behind from the primordial era. Many cultivators managed to encounter heaven-defying opportunities in the ancient battlefield and soared into the skies. What would happen if one managed to obtain an opportunity in the primordial ruin? If a cultivator were to obtain it, they might be able to dominate the world. If a sect were to obtain it, they might become the strongest sect in the Great Zhou dynasty. In fact, they might even become the strongest sect in the entire north region of Tianhuang mainland and might even be on par with the immortal sects. Among the tens of thousands of cultivators, most of them were itinerant cultivators and some were from sections. Among them, Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect were the strongest. In the Great Zhou dynasty, those two sects were second only to the five major sects, and Su Zimo had heard of them as well. The few Jinying Jinjuan were from those two sects. Roar! Suddenly, a roar sounded from not far away. A golden lion with a terrifying aura sped over. It was massive and had a frightening aura. Its eyes were widened with a cold glint. It was clear that the golden lion was a spirit demon that had cultivated an inner core and was extraordinarily handsome. Many cultivators were startled and quickly scattered. The golden lion stepped through the air and arrived beside a Jinying Jinjuan, lowering its head and body obediently. Yes, the Jinying Jinjuan nodded and leaped onto it. Ta! 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 The sound of hurried hooves could be heard. A pure white horse with a single horn on its head galloped over from the distant skies. It snorted continuously and arrived beside another Jinying Jinjuan at an extremely fast speed. Before long, the beasts of the few Jinying Jinjuan present had arrived. Those beasts had terrifying auras and were all spirit demons that had cultivated an inner core. However, when these exotic beasts looked at the ancient ruins in the distance, their eyes faintly revealed a hint of fear. Let's go, let's go. Among them, a Jinying Jinjuan of Heaven Azura sect ordered and led his disciples towards the primordial ruin. Immediately after, Jinying Jinjuan of Purple Cloud sect led his disciples and followed. The primordial ruin is so dangerous. Should we observe it? If we stay here and watch, I'm worried that someone will beat us to it if there really is an ancient treasure. Let's follow them then. This is our last chance. If we follow the group of nascent souls, we'll have a chance to survive even if we can't obtain the ancient treasure. The remaining cultivators discussed among themselves and quickly divided into two camps. Most of the cultivators chose to follow the Tian Luo sect and Purple Cloud sect to the ancient ruins. Only a small portion of the cultivators with hesitant expressions on the spot. Initially, Su Zimo did not intend to enter so early. However, he had just realized that traces of blood-eyed crows had already appeared in the skies. Furthermore, their numbers were increasing gradually. This meant that the blood-eyed crows that were closest to this place had already caught up. It wouldn't be long before the people who were chasing after him arrived here. I can't delay any longer. A vicious glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. If he was blocked outside the primordial ruin, he would have nowhere to run. Su Zimo blended into the crowd and headed towards the primordial ruin. There was a dense forest outside the primordial ruin and it was dark within. The closer they got to the primordial ruin, the denser the trees around them were, emitting an ancient aura. Every single ancient tree was extremely thick and needed more than 10 people to wrap their arms around it. They rose from the ground and towered into the clouds. A cool breeze blew gently, and the fragmented sunlight shone through the dense and lush leaves, bringing some warmth to everyone. Although the group of cultivators was huge with tens of thousands of them and looked rather imposing, they seemed insignificant in this primordial forest. Unknowingly, Night Spirit had popped out. Sprawled on Su Zimo's chest, it stuck its head out and surveyed the area with a pair of pitch-black eyes with a cold expression. Even the beasts that Jinying Jinjuan sat on, such as the golden lion and unicorn that had cultivated inner cores, were trembling in fear in this primordial forest. However, there was no trace of fear on Night Spirit's face. All of a sudden, a tragic cry sounded from the front. Suzumo's heart skipped a beat as he stopped in his tracks and looked over. Not far ahead, a gigantic anaconda was coiled on the branches of an ancient tree and its body was almost fused with the tree. If not for the fact that there were a few people in its mouth and blood was spewing out, Suzumo would not have been able to detect it with his eyesight. The anaconda was way too huge. More than half of its body was hidden in the leaves. However, just the part that was exposed was more than 100 feet long. Those few cultivators were not even enough to fill the gaps between its teeth. The most terrifying thing was that even perfected being Jean Dan could not resist at all and was crushed in a single bite before being devoured. Boom! A nascent soul cultivator attacked brazenly. His sleeves trembled and an extremely terrifying power burst forth, smashing heavily onto the anaconda's body. The anaconda's body slanted from the impact and a few of its scales slid off, revealing its flesh. However, not only did the anaconda not retreat, it was even more ferocious as its eyes shone with a cold and cruel glint. Psst! The anaconda opened its mouth and inhaled fiercely, as though it wanted to devour the entire world. A violent wind howled. The gigantic air current was almost corporeal, like a saber or sword. It surged over and even the branches on the ancient tree were severed by the evil wind as leaves rustled down. There was no way the weaker cultivators could control their bodies and were sucked into the anaconda's mouth instantly. This was the true anaconda eclipse. Even though Suzumo had cultivated this move as well, he was still extremely shocked when he saw it now. Beast, you must have a death wish. Another nascent soul cultivator attacked and hollered, shooting out 3 flying swords. The 3 flying swords were surging with an extremely powerful force that far exceeded the scope of a spirit art. When the 3 flying swords were about to enter the anaconda's mouth, the nascent soul cultivator who attacked seemed to have sensed something and his expression changed starkly. Not good, hurry and retreat. That person exclaimed and waved his sleeves, sweeping up the 3 flying swords that were shot out and fleeing into the distance immediately. Suzumo's eyelids twitched. There were 2 fist-sized bumps on the anaconda's head that were protruding, resembling a pair of horns. That's not an anaconda, it's a WYRM. If it was an anaconda, it could only be considered as a remnant demon beast. However, if it cultivated into a WYRM, it would be equivalent to a pure-blooded ferocious beast. The few nascent soul cultivators in the group sped into the distance immediately. The army of cultivators behind them did not dare to linger and followed hurriedly. The crowd was in a mess and fled with all their might. Bang! The tail of the WYRM suddenly fell and smashed into the crowd, causing a blood mist to appear in the air. It was way too tragic. Hundreds of cultivators died in the blink of an eye. Be it chi condensation, foundation establishment or perfected Jean Dan, they were like ants against the WYRM and could not withstand a single blow. At that moment, everyone had yet to step foot into the primordial ruin. This meant that the massacre had only just begun. Chapter 231. The primordial forest before him was 100 times more dangerous than Songlang mountain range. Any random demon beast that popped out was a pure-blooded ferocious beast. Even Jinying Jinjuan was scared away and did not dare to take it head-on. Suzumo took advantage of the chaos to escape. Lowering his body, he used his limbs to slither through the dense forest like an anaconda with agile movement techniques. In such an environment, Suzumo's chances of survival were much higher than cultivators of the same level. That was because, to a certain extent, Suzumo was a demon. He knew the habits and methods of most demon beasts and the rules of survival in the forest. Initially, Suzumo was worried that Night Spirit would run around. Although Night Spirit could kill a Jean Dan realm spirit demon in Dongling Valley, Night Spirit was still a demon beast. However, Suzumo knew very well that Night Spirit's strength was far inferior to a Jean Dan realm spirit demon. To Suzumo's surprise, although Night Spirit was not afraid, it was extremely obedient and stayed in his embrace obediently. It merely stuck its head out and surveyed the surroundings vigilantly. Before long, Su Zimo finally escaped from the WIRM's attack range. Before he could catch his breath, Su Zimo's expression changed. He suddenly sensed an even greater danger approaching rapidly. Not good, I've got to leave this place as soon as possible. His survival experience in Songlang mountain range told him that the blood stench of the battle behind him would attract even stronger demon beasts. The strength of those demon beasts would not be weaker than the WIRM, and they should be pure-blooded ferocious beasts as well. If he was trapped here by those pure-blooded ferocious beasts, he would definitely die. At that moment, Su Zimo finally understood that Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect did not have the motive of chasing away those itinerant cultivators. The main objective of the two sects was to make use of the flesh of those itinerant cultivators to attract the ferocious beasts in the forest so that they could take the opportunity to escape. When those itinerant cultivators made use of the two major sects, they were actually being made use of by the two major sects as well. Due to the flood dragon blocking the way, the tens of thousands of cultivators were quickly divided into two camps. Among them, most of the cultivators were intercepted by the ferocious flood dragon, while a few nascent soul cultivators of the Tian Luo sect and the Purple Cloud sect led their disciples towards the ancient ruins. Behind the cultivators from the two sects, there were also some rogue cultivators, including Su Zimo. Most of the cultivators who could break through the flood dragon's blockade had some tricks up their sleeves. Su Zimo glanced at it. Among these rogue cultivators, there was indeed a cultivator that Su Zimo had some impression of. This person was dressed in a grey Taoist robe and held a folding fan in his hand. He looked to be in his 30s, with a pale face and a slightly plump figure. His appearance was ordinary, but his eyes were extremely spirited. When they were outside, Su Zimo had a few words with this person. This person liked to talk nonsense, and even said it as if it was true. Previously, the rumor about dragons roaring and tigers roaring in the ancient ruins, and seeing a true dragon whose scales were bigger than a human's, came from this person. Who would believe these meaningless words? Su Zimo had checked the cultivation of this person and found that he was only at early-stage foundation establishment. You've got some skills, Su Zimo nodded to himself. To be fair, the reason why Su Zimo could keep up was because of his demonic cultivation methods. However, it was truly not easy for this grey-robed cultivator to be able to make it this far with the strength of an early-stage foundation establishment. As though he sensed something, the grey-robed cultivator turned back and glanced at Su Zimo, smiling with a friendly attitude. Right then, a commotion broke out ahead once more. A gigantic tiger darted out of the forest. It was dozens of feet tall and had a ferocious expression, lunging towards the crowd immediately. What was even more frightening was that the tiger had 9 tails. 9 tails, tiger form. Su Zimo recalled for a moment and said slowly with a grim expression, pure-blooded ferocious beast, Lu Wu. At the same time, the grey-robed young man frowned and murmured, it's a Lu Wu. The Lu Wu was one of the ancient ferocious beasts. It had 9 tails and was shaped like a tiger with terrifying strength. The moment the Lu Wu charged into the crowd, the golden lion roared, wanting to push it back or even kill it. However, the Lu Wu danced with its 9 tails and lunged forward. In a single round, it bit off the golden lion's neck and fresh blood gushed out. A blood mist spread through the forest. The owner of the golden lion, a Jining Jinjuan, fled into the distance without hesitation. Many cultivators had already lost their order and were panicking as they fled in all directions. However, the forest was not as simple as they thought. Furthermore, this was a primordial forest. It was easy to enter but difficult to get out. Swoosh! A centipede that was more than 10 meters long and as thick as a water bucket crawled out of the forest. Its entire body was blood red and its 1,000 legs moved continuously with a menacing gaze. The blood-colored centipede killed its way into the crowd and split the formation into 2 once more. Powerful demon beasts appeared continuously in the forest and most of them were pure-blooded ferocious beasts. There was no way Su Zimo could fight against them and could only make use of the chaos to escape. In a forest as such, even Jinying Jinjuan was useless. They had to escape the moment they saw pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Su Zimo could not imagine what sort of terrifying existences he would encounter if he truly entered the primordial ruin. It was way too tragic. There were more than 30,000 cultivators who entered the primordial forest. Now, there were only a few thousand left and the rest were almost buried in the forest. If they could truly make it out of the forest, how many of the remaining few thousand would survive? 100 kilometers away from the primordial ruin, a gigantic pitch-black crow flapped its wings and sped over at lightning speed. A middle-aged man in blood robes sat on the back of the pitch-black crow. They were the Blood Crow King and Blood Crow Palace's lord. The Blood Crow Palace's lord had just executed a tracking secret skill when he gradually frowned and his gaze flickered. "Master, what's wrong? Could Su Zimo have hidden in Jishui River again?" The Blood Crow King asked. "No," the Blood Crow Palace's lord's expression darkened and he grit his teeth. "That lad is about to enter that region." "Ah!" The Blood Crow King did not understand and was stunned for a moment. A moment later, he was enlightened and a look of fear flashed through his eyes as he asked tentatively, "That region?" "Yes," the Blood Crow Palace's lord nodded. The Blood Crow King analyzed, "That lad's goal should be to lure you there. You must not fall for it, master." Pausing for a moment, he continued, "Furthermore, what sort of place is that? Even Jinying Jinjuan, a void reversion, might not be able to escape unscathed. If a mere foundation establishment cultivator like him goes, he'll definitely die." "That lad is scheming," the Blood Crow Palace's lord said with a dark expression. "This is an open scheme. Even if I know his intentions, I have to go. Even if he dies, I have to witness it with my own eyes. Master, be careful. Don't be rash, it's fine. This open scheme can be said to be rather brilliant. It's a pity that the lad missed something." The Blood Crow Palace's lord waved it off and sneered, "He doesn't know my identity nor does he know what's in that region. Even if those existences are alerted, given my identity, it shouldn't be an issue for me to escape unscathed. Let's go. I want to see where else this Su Zimo can escape to." Chapter 232. The primordial forest was filled with a pungent stench of blood. A blood mist floated and hung on the branches and leaves, condensing into blood droplets that slid down silently. Amidst the brambles, on the gravel and between the branches, broken corpses were strewn one after another. Their deaths were tragic, they were either torn into two or crushed into meat paste, completely unrecognizable. This forest had already turned into a Shura purgatory. It was filled with blood and brutality as the roars of ferocious beasts echoed one after another. The ancient trees swayed and the ground quaked. Su Zimo believed that someone would have already regretted it the moment the massacre started. However, it was already too late for them to leave this primordial forest by then. The ferocious beasts in this forest had already cut off their escape route completely. There were fewer and fewer people left. Su Zimo witnessed with his own eyes that the nascent soul cultivator at the front was dragged away by a seemingly harmless flower. There was a tragic cry before silence. Even the most ordinary vegetation in the forest was left behind from the primordial era and was extremely terrifying. The pressure increased. Even nascent souls could not guarantee that they could escape this forest. Even if Su Zimo was familiar with the laws of the jungle, it would be difficult for him to leave this place alive. Right then, Su Zimo glanced over and discovered that the gray-robed cultivator not far away had suddenly changed directions. He was no longer following behind Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect, burrowing into another patch of bushes. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he pondered. Right now, even though Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect had nascent souls paving the way and were strong, they were huge targets and were the #1 targets of the primordial beasts. If they took another path at this moment, it would be relatively safer. Of course, that was only relative. In this primordial forest, every step was filled with killing intent. Danger could be seen everywhere. There was no safe place. Su Zimo's gaze flickered and he changed directions as well, following the gray-robed cultivator's path. Like an anaconda, Zimo slithered through the bushes and caught up to the gray-robed cultivator before long, trailing far behind. The gray-robed cultivator's speed was not fast and he would even stop occasionally. Additionally, the gray-robed cultivator's actions were rather strange. His right hand was holding the folding fan while his left hand was spread open. His thumb was constantly touching his other fingers at an extremely fast speed, as though he was trying to deduce something. What confused Zimo the most was that even though more than half of the tens of thousands of cultivators had died in the woods, there was no sign of fear on the man's face. Such a temperament was too terrifying. Right then, the gray-robed cultivator stopped in his tracks and hid once more. Seeing this scene, Zimo did not act rashly. His entire body was pressed against the ground as he held his breath and concentrated. A moment later, Zimo was alarmed. Immediately after, a large shadow swept over their heads, covering the sky and the sun, exuding a terrifying and ferocious aura. It flew towards the direction of the Tianluo sect and the Ziyun sect at an extremely fast speed. Zimo's face paled, and he broke out in a cold sweat. Even though Zimo could sense danger in this primordial forest with his spiritual perception, he was still able to sense danger ahead of time. However, it would be too late by then. The gray-robed cultivator stood up and continued sprinting forward. This person has some tricks up his sleeves. If we follow behind him, we might really be able to get out of this forest. Zimo followed closely behind. Indeed, Zimo followed behind the man and stopped along the way, avoiding the attacks of ferocious beasts multiple times. In Zimo's eyes, the gray-robed cultivator instantly became unfathomable. Before long, the gray-robed cultivator ahead seemed to have sensed something and suddenly turned around. Zimo crouched down hurriedly and hid. The gray-robed cultivator swept his gaze and paused for a moment at the spot where Zimo was hiding. Smiling meaningfully, he turned around and continued forward. This time round, the gray-robed cultivator took left and right steps in a strange manner. Burrowing into the forest, he disappeared from Zimo's sight. Zimo followed hurriedly but realized that he had completely lost track of the gray-robed cultivator. Zimo realized that his tracks had been exposed and the gray-robed cultivator had sensed it. That was why the gray-robed cultivator chose to shake him off. Foo-foo. Zimo smiled faintly and checked on the spot carefully before choosing a direction to chase in. Traversing through such a forest would definitely leave behind traces. Others might not be able to see it. However, given Zimo's experience in surviving in the forest, he could find clues and determine the direction the gray-robed cultivator left in. Of course, that would mean that Zimo's speed would be much slower. A moment later, Zimo looked over and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Not far ahead was the edge of the primordial forest. All of a sudden, Zimo's expression changed starkly. Without hesitation, he shifted horizontally from the spot. Clang! A deafening sound came from behind. Turning back, Zimo could not help but gasp and feel chills run down his spine. A gigantic ferocious beast with 8 legs and burning with flames stood in front of Zimo with a menacing expression. It was an ancient ferocious beast, the blue flame spider. Although the blue flame spider did not know how to spit silk, its 8 sharp claws were more terrifying than any divine weapon. Just now, the blue flame spider's claws descended like a gigantic guillotine filled with spikes, carving out a ravine on the ground. If Zimo was half a step slower, he would have been sliced into 2. Given Zimo's cultivation realm, he would be burned to ashes the moment he came into contact with the flames on the blue flame spider's body. Zimo did not dare to linger and turned to flee. Clang! 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 The blue flame spider chased after him relentlessly at an extremely fast speed and sparks flew as its claws sliced through the rocks. Rumble! Boom! Suddenly, a deafening sound came from behind Zimo. Not far behind him, a gigantic pitch-black cave appeared beneath the blue flame spider. It was dark and deep within, emitting a chilling killing intent. A hint of panic flashed through the eyes of the blue flame spider, as though it wanted to escape. Boom! Suddenly, a huge pitch-black fleshy tentacle emerged from the crypt. It was like a giant python and it coiled around the body of the pale flame spider. Screech! Screech! The blue flame spider let out a series of ear-piercing cries and struggled continuously. However, it was to no avail and it was dragged into the cave in the blink of an eye, vanishing. Su Zimo gulped. He did not manage to see what was in the cave at all. Swoosh! Swoosh! A commotion sounded from the forest not far away. The footsteps of ferocious beasts could be heard with killing intent. Suddenly, Su Zimo released his power of blood chi and demonic chi filled his body. He executed divine steed fleeting and sprinted forward with all his might. The silver-winged cicada, bloodthirsty centipede, wind-riding eagle and many other pure-blooded ancient ferocious beasts charged over with murderous intent. Su Zimo grit his teeth and persevered with a resolute gaze. 50 feet, 30 feet, 10 feet. Swoosh! His vision cleared up. Su Zimo had finally charged out of the primordial forest. As for the many ancient ferocious beasts that chased to the edge of the forest came to a tacit understanding and stopped in their tracks. Their eyes were filled with fear as they retreated slowly. Chapter 233. There were tens of thousands of cultivators that entered the forest behind him. However, Su Zimo believed that less than 1% of them would be able to make it out of the forest alive. As one of them, Su Zimo should be happy. However, looking at the many ferocious beasts that were retreating into the forest, Su Zimo suddenly realized that the moment he charged out of the forest, it also meant that he had stepped onto the land left behind from the primordial era. The primordial ruin. It was marked as the location of the most fearsome place on the map. The primordial ruin that even so many ferocious pure-blooded ferocious beasts were wary of. What sort of ancient secrets were hidden in this region? Su Zimo turned around slowly and looked over. That single glance caused Su Zimo's pupils to constrict and his heart to stop beating. There were endless piles of bones. At a glance, there was no end to them and they covered the entire land. Many of the skeletons belonged to humans but there were also remnants of ferocious beasts. Almost none of them were intact and they were all shattered and scattered on the ground. This was a true sea of bones. Standing in front of this sea of bones, Su Zimo seemed incomparably tiny. It was as though he would be devoured by the sea of bones the moment he entered and nothing would be left. There was an inexplicable fear, an indescribable suffocation, an omnipresent oppression and a faint stench of blood. Right then, Su Zimo's chest moved and Night Spirit suddenly burrowed out, leaping down. Looking at the sea of bones before him, Night Spirit's nose twitched. His expression was grim and his eyes shone with a mysterious glint. All of a sudden, at the edge of the primordial forest not far away, two figures were the first to run out. They were covered in blood and looked wretched. It's them. Su Zimo swept his gaze and recognized the two of them. They were Jining Jinjuan from Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect respectively. The two of them looked at the forest behind them with lingering fear. When they turned back to look at the sea of bones before them, they were stunned on the spot and could not conceal the shock in their eyes. Even Jining Jinjuan would feel incomparably tiny in the face of this sea of bones. How tragic of a battle was it for such a terrifying ruin to be formed? Run! It's right in front. Quick, quick! Save me! A cry of surprise came from the forest not far away. Not long after, another group of cultivators rushed out of the forest. There were more than 100 of them. Their hair was disheveled and their clothes were ragged. They fell to the ground and panted heavily. Among these people were Taoist Master Jin Dan and Foundation Establishment cultivators. Including Jining Jinjuan and Reverend Jin Dan, there were only a little more than 100 cultivators left in the army of tens of thousands of cultivators. The others did not even have the chance to see the primordial ruins. All of them died in the forest. Su Zimo glanced in that direction and retracted his gaze. He didn't want to attract the attention of those cultivators. Suddenly, the night spirit whimpered. She opened her mouth and gently bit Su Zimo's clothes, pulling them towards the sea of bones. You want to go in? Su Zimo frowned and asked in a low voice. The night spirit nodded. This sea of bones is not simple. I don't know what dangers lie ahead. Let's wait for those people to scout first. We're not in a hurry, Su Zimo said. The night spirit shook her head. Suddenly, she raised a hind leg and peed on Su Zimo. Naturally, Su Zimo could dodge it easily. However, on second thought, the night spirit had already gained sentience and was extremely intelligent. There must be a reason why she chose to do that. What sect are you from? What's your name? Right then, two Jinying Jinjuan strode over and looked down at Su Zimo. Their tone was cold and unquestionable. I'm Su Zimo. I don't belong to any sect. Su Zimo replied calmly with a half-truth. That's great. Go take a look at the Sea of Bones. If you can return alive, you can choose from Heaven Azura sect or Purple Cloud sect. We'll let you join either of them, one of the Jinying Jinjuan said. That's right. The other Jinying Jinjuan nodded as well. Su Zimo, this is a great opportunity for you. Su Zimo sneered internally and did not reply. No matter what, he had to leave this Sea of Bones. The difference was whether he should leave now or wait for his pursuers to catch up. Given the current situation, if he didn't enter the Sea of Bones, the two Jinying Jinjuan beside him would most likely kill him right here. Furthermore, the night spirit was still persevering. She looked at Su Zimo expectantly, eager to enter the Sea of Bones. At that thought, Su Zimo did not hesitate and strode towards the Sea of Bones. Night Spirit followed beside Su Zimo's feet like a half-grown black puppy with a hint of excitement in the depths of her eyes. The moment Su Zimo stepped into the Sea of Bones, he felt something amiss. The spirit energy in his dantian seemed to be restrained by an invisible force and could not be mobilized. It was similar to the effect of the spirit lock formation, but it was much more terrifying. Su Zimo took a deep breath and walked towards the depths of the Sea of Bones. The Sea of White Bones was eerie and terrifying yet unusually peaceful. After half an incense's time, Su Zimo had already walked far into the Sea of Bones. However, nothing happened. Master, let's go in as well. Don't let that lad get ahead of us if there's really something good. Someone from Heaven Azura sect suggested. Yes. The two Jinying Jinjuan agreed at the same time. With a single order, they led their remaining disciples into the Sea of Bones. With their spirit energy restrained, even perfected being Jin Dan could not walk on air and could only walk on foot. Jinying Jinjuan was the only one who had the ability to fly at low altitudes in the Sea of Bones. The cultivators of both sects had already made up their minds to follow Su Zimo. They wouldn't get too close, but they wouldn't get too far either. If anything were to happen, Su Zimo would die first and they would have a chance to escape. However, not long after the cultivators of both sects entered the Sea of Bones, a huge commotion occurred within. Su Zimo turned around. Waves surged through the Sea of Bones in a ferocious manner. As though they were stimulated by something, the endless white bones bounced up from the ground one after another. Under the support of some mysterious power, they took on all sorts of forms. Some of them formed gigantic white bone palms that reached out from the Sea of Bones and grabbed the crowd viciously. More than half of the cultivators of both sects died. Blood mist spewed out. Some of them transformed into ferocious beasts made of pure bones with immense strength. They were incomparably violent and killed anyone they saw. Around Su Zimo, white bones bounced up continuously as well. However, the white bones seemed to have ignored Su Zimo and the night spirit and surged towards the cultivators of both sects not far away. Could it be that the P of the night spirit is really working? Although Su Zimo did not want to believe it, that was the only possibility. Bang! One of the Jinying Jinjuan clashed head-on with a white bone beast. Jinying Jinjuan's expression changed starkly as he retreated 3 steps back. Immediately after, Jinying Jinjuan's body exploded into a pile of meat paste without a corpse left. Jining Jinjuan could not even take a single hit from those bone beasts. When he saw that, Su Zimo knew that it was over for Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect. This sea of bones was their final resting place. Chapter 234. The winds and clouds changed and the bone waves surged. As though they were agitated, countless white bones surged and formed all sorts of remnant ferocious beasts. One after another, terrifying existences crawled out from the sea of bones. Malevolent auras filled the air and blood chi surged into the skies. Su Zimo could not identify the origins of those remnant ferocious beasts through their skeletal forms. However, there was no lack of human-shaped skeletons among them and their combat strength was extremely terrifying as well. The remaining 100-odd cultivators of Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect, including Jining Jinjuan and perfected Jin Dan, were all killed by countless white-bone ferocious beasts. Fresh blood splattered and severed limbs were strewn everywhere as tragic cries rang out endlessly. When he saw that, Su Zimo felt his scalp tingle and his limbs turn cold. Was this the power of the primordial ruin? If these powerful living beings possessed such terrifying combat strength even after death, what cultivation realms were they in when they were alive? Who was it that buried them here, forming such a vast and boundless sea of bones? What was in the depths of this sea of bones? Instantly, countless questions flashed through Su Zimo's mind. At this moment, Su Zimo truly felt how insignificant he was. Even though he was already a foundation establishment cultivator and could fly on his sword, he was still insignificant. Su Zimo walked step by step towards the depths of the sea of bones. It was as though he was walking towards an extremely foreign era. He was walking into an unknown civilization that had been buried in the river of time. The tragic cries behind him were gradually fading. The cultivators of the two sects were all buried in the sea of bones without a single survivor. One after another, the ferocious and powerful white-bone ferocious beasts fell to the ground one after another. The sea of bones regained its calmness. It was terrifyingly silent. It was as though the killing and massacre just now was merely Su Zimo's imagination. A gentle breeze blew and Su Zimo felt a chill down his spine. Unknowingly, he was already drenched in cold sweat. Su Zimo glanced at Night Spirit beside his feet. He vaguely guessed that the reason why the powerful existences in the Bone Sea didn't attack him was because of the Night Spirit. Night Spirit, on the other hand, was very alert. He sniffed the air while leading the way. Su Zimo followed behind him. In this boundless sea of bones, there was only one man and one beast. There were no signs of life in the surroundings. It was incomparably desolate. A thick fog gradually appeared in front of them. It was getting thicker and thicker, and the visibility was extremely low. Within the fog, there was some moisture and a fishy smell. After an unknown period of time, a grayish-white stone pillar stood tall in the fog ahead. It was extremely thick and towered into the clouds. Su Zimo stood in front of this stone pillar, appearing extremely small. Su Zimo reached out and touched the stone pillar. This was out of Su Zimo's expectation. This gigantic stone pillar was left behind from the primordial era. After being battered by wind and rain and the passage of time, its surface was still as smooth as jade without any hint of roughness. Under normal circumstances, even supreme-grade spirit weapons would have lost their spirituality after tens of thousands of years, let alone stone pillars. Furthermore, the primordial era was probably millions or even tens of millions of years away from the present. This stone pillar is a treasure. If only I could carry it away. Su Zimo circled the stone pillar a few times and lamented internally. Of course, that was just a random thought. Given Su Zimo's strength, there was no way he could stuff this stone pillar into his storage bag. Even if Su Zimo had the ability, there was no way he could do that. Given how terrifying the Bone Sea was, who knew what the purpose of such a gigantic stone pillar was? What if he alarmed the terrifying existences in the Bone Sea by moving this stone pillar? Su Zimo circled the stone pillar once more and found no traces on it. Strange. A look of confusion flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Initially, He thought that there might be some information, patterns or even traces of the primordial era carved on the stone pillar. However, there was nothing on the surface of the stone pillar. A gust of wind blew through the bone sea and the fog dissipated slightly. Su Zimo looked around and his gaze froze as he exclaimed softly. 1,000 feet away from this stone pillar, there was another stone pillar standing right next to it. Su Zimo walked over to take a look. This stone pillar was almost the same as the first one he saw. The surface of the stone pillar was as smooth as jade and there were no traces left behind. As they continued to walk in this direction, a thick and solid stone pillar like this would appear almost every 1,000 feet. What's going on? Su Zimo pondered for a moment but could not figure it out. Under the urging of the night spirit, he continued walking forward. Before long, Su Zimo stopped in his tracks once more. He had arrived at the end of the Bone Sea. At the end of the Bone Sea was a towering mountain peak that pierced through the clouds. It was lush and full of life with lush vegetation. There were even green waters at the foot of the mountain, making it look like an immortal realm. For a moment, Su Zimo could not react to the sudden arrival of a vibrant mountain peak from the dead silent Bone Sea. Suddenly, Su Zimo thought of a possibility. The Bone Sea behind him was truly just the edge of the primordial ruin. However, this mountain peak before him might be the center of the primordial ruin. Or perhaps, this mountain peak was not even the center of the ruin and he would only be able to truly come into contact with the secrets of the ruin after crossing the mountain peak. Be it the primordial forest or the Bone Sea behind him, they were merely the defensive lines that protected the center of the ruin. Yeah. The night spirit called out a few times and urged Su Zimo to continue walking forward. When he arrived at the foot of the mountain, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as though he sensed something. Glancing sideways, Su Zimo looked towards the forest at the side. Not far away, a figure suddenly appeared beside an ancient tree. He wore gray robes and was slightly plump, holding a folding fan in his hands and had a fair face without a beard. It's you. It's you. The two of them exchanged glances and were stunned for a moment before exclaiming. Su Zimo had not expected to meet this gray-robed cultivator here. Back in the primordial forest, Su Zimo had already discovered that this gray-robed cultivator was not simple and had some tricks up his sleeves. However, after entering the Bone Sea, Su Zimo thought that this person had already died in the Bone Sea. To think that this person would have arrived at this mountain peak first. While Su Zimo was surprised, the gray-robed cultivator was even more shocked. Given his eyesight, he could naturally tell that Su Zimo was only a foundation establishment cultivator and there was no way he could have concealed his cultivation realm. The gray-robed cultivator had long known that these tens of thousands of cultivators who wanted to enter the primordial ruin would all die. Apart from him, no one else would survive. To think that this seemingly ordinary green-robed cultivator would be able to cross the Bone Sea. He could understand why the green-robed cultivator could cross the primordial forest. After all, the green-robed cultivator was smart enough to choose to follow behind him in the forest. However, he had already shaken that person off at the end. Interesting. The gray-robed cultivator walked towards Su Zimo slowly with a malicious smile on his face. Chapter 235. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze warily. Although the gray-robed cultivator before him was only at early-stage foundation establishment, Su Zimo did not dare to be careless. This person exuded a strange aura from head to toe and was unfathomable. Furthermore, the fact that this person could pass through the primordial forest and sea of bones with ease was enough for Su Zimo to be wary of him. The gray-robed cultivator arrived about 10 meters away from Su Zimo and stopped in his tracks. Raising his brow slightly, he asked with a fake smile, "Fellow Daoist, you sure are following me closely. I can't shake you off even with that." Su Zimo looked at the person calmly in silence. A mocking look flashed through the gray-robed cultivator's eyes as his expression darkened. Suddenly, he retracted his smile and asked coldly, "Tell me, where are you from and why are you following me?" With that said, the gray-robed cultivator glared at Su Zimo's face, trying to find a loophole in Su Zimo's expression and gaze. "I'm not following you. Su Zimo was expressionless as he shook his head. That was the truth to begin with. The gray-robed cultivator could not help but frown when he failed to find anything. Could it really be a coincidence? No. The gray-robed cultivator thought about it. Even if it's a coincidence, I can't let him continue forward. If my plans are ruined because of him, I'll lose more than I gain. How did you pass through the sea of bones? Suddenly, the gray-robed cultivator asked. I walked over. When he heard that answer, the gray-robed cultivator's mouth twitched as he hesitated to speak. The gray-robed cultivator's gaze swept across Su Zimo before landing on Night Spirit, who was beside his feet. When he saw Night Spirit, the gray-robed cultivator could no longer hold it in and rolled his eyes. The gray-robed cultivator mocked, "Fellow Taoist, your preferences are truly extraordinary. Everyone else would look for the cubs of ancient remnant beasts or pure-blooded ferocious beasts as their battle beasts. Yet, you're rearing a black dog cub. None of your business." Su Zimo sneered and retorted. The gray-robed cultivator was not angry as he waved the folding fan in his hands and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, let me give you a piece of advice. Since you can pass through the sea of bones, I advise you to turn back and stop advancing. This is not a place you can come to." The gray-robed cultivator pointed to the mountain peak beside him and said word by word with a stern expression. Su Zimo did not reply. He wanted to turn back as well. To be precise, right from the beginning, Su Zimo had no intention of taking the initiative to step into this place. Su Zimo's choice because he was cornered to his back too. If he turned back now, he would stattoos. Furthermore, it was all thanks to Night Spirit's guidance and perseverance that he was able to reach this point. There was no way he was going to retreat that easily. You? The gray-robed cultivator frowned and murmured, "That's troublesome. I can't possibly allow you to follow me and ruin my plans. You go your way and I'll go mine. We won't interfere with each other." Su Zimo was wary of the gray-robed cultivator and did not want to get into a conflict with him. The gray-robed cultivator remained silent for a moment before shaking his head. "No, that's too risky. Since you're not retreating, don't blame me." When he heard that, Su Zimo's expression changed and he attacked without hesitation. The two of them were extremely close. If nothing went wrong, Su Zimo was 70% confident that he could suppress the gray-robed cultivator. Boom! A clear footprint appeared on the ground with the plow heaven stride and the surrounding mud flew everywhere. Almost instantly, Su Zimo arrived before the gray-robed cultivator. Channeling his bloodline, the sound of a tsunami could be heard from within his body, accompanied by lightning and thunder in a terrifying manner. Against Su Zimo's preemptive attack and hearing the sounds coming from Su Zimo's body, the gray-robed cultivator did not panic at all. Instead, he exclaimed softly with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Such a powerful bloodline. How did you cultivate?" Without saying anything, Su Zimo swung his arm and punched in reverse towards the gray-robed cultivator's head. It was like a gigantic seal that crashed down. Not bad, not bad. Against Su Zimo's move, the gray-robed cultivator did not dodge or avoid it. Instead, he nodded and praised. Suddenly, the gray-robed cultivator reached out with his folding fan and tapped Su Zimo's wrist gently. The speed of this attack was extremely fast. Although it was launched later, it arrived first. The landing point was precise and the timing was impeccable. Bang! Su Zimo's wrist went numb and the power of the punch dissipated. Right after, Su Zimo's wrist felt a piercing pain as though it was broken. The gray-robed cultivator chuckled and took out a rope from nowhere. He tossed it gently in Su Zimo's direction and muttered, "Bind." The rope quickly coiled around Su Zimo's body, binding his arms and legs to the sides of his body, coiling round after round. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was bound tightly by that inconspicuous rope and could not move at all. A black shadow darted out. "Night Spirit, don't move." Su Zimo called out to Night Spirit hurriedly. Actually, the moment the gray-robed cultivator attacked, Su Zimo had already realized that this person was definitely not at early-stage Foundation establishment. He could be perfected Jin Dan or Jinying Jinjuan. At the very least, the gray-robed cultivator's cultivation realm was far above his. Against such a strong cultivator, Night Spirit would not be able to do anything even if he charged forward. In fact, he might even be killed by the gray-robed cultivator in a single move. Night Spirit stopped in his tracks and glared at the gray-robed cultivator coldly. He stuck his head out and growled from the depths of his throat with a chilling killing intent. Ha! Arriving before Night Spirit, the gray-robed cultivator squatted down and said with a smile, "Black puppy, you've got some guts, huh? How dare you be fierce to me?" The man and beast were extremely close to each other. Night Spirit could reach him with a single raise of his hand. However, after a moment, Night Spirit did not attack and his gaze was still cold. Smiling, the gray-robed cultivator extended his folding fan and tapped Night Spirit on the head. "Not bad, you're quite smart. Consider yourself lucky." Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief. Naturally, he could tell that just now, the gray-robed cultivator was luring Night Spirit to attack on purpose. If Night Spirit had truly attacked, not only would he not be able to injure the gray-robed cultivator, the latter would even take the opportunity to kill Night Spirit. Standing up, the gray-robed cultivator looked at Su Zimo with a helpless expression and shrugged. "Since you're unwilling to leave, I can only trap you here. Also, this is the demon suppressing rope." "Oh, I don't think you've heard of it before." The gray-robed cultivator continued, "The demon suppressing rope can even bind pure-blooded ferocious beasts tightly. Although your physique is strong, it's not a match for pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Don't try to break free or you'll just be asking for trouble." Su Zimo did not reply. Turning around, the gray-robed cultivator took a few steps, seemingly worried as he said, "Stay here obediently. I'll come down in a while to help you release the demon suppressing rope." With that said, the gray-robed cultivator darted into the forest and disappeared towards the peak of the mountain. Chapter 236. Two figures stumbled out of the primordial forest and descended before the Sea of Bones. "Thank you for saving me, Master," the Blood Crow King said with lingering fear. If not for the Palace Lord, he would not have been able to pass through the primordial forest with his own strength. The Palace Lord nodded and turned back to look at the remnant ferocious beasts that were retreating in the forest, heaving a sigh of relief. Even with his strength as a void reversion, he had to be careful in passing through the primordial forest. If he were to encounter the overlord of the forest, he could only retreat to protect himself. "Master, are we still going to chase? That lad is only a Foundation establishment cultivator. Can he really pass through the primordial forest?" The Blood Crow King's tone was clearly doubtful. Surveying his surroundings, the Palace Lord noticed the traces left behind by the Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect cultivators and nodded. "Yes, that lad's luck is not bad. He should have escaped from the crowd." Narrowing his eyes, the Palace Lord looked at the Sea of Bones before him in silence. In the depths of the Blood Crow King's eyes, there was a deep shock. There were so many white bones piled up into a sea. Furthermore, these were bones left behind from the primordial era that had yet to rot. How strong was the owner of these bones back then? "Master, are we going to pass through the Sea of Bones?" the Blood Crow King asked carefully at the side. Since there were no traces of Su Zimo here, logically speaking, Su Zimo should have stepped into the Sea of Bones. However, for some reason, the Blood Crow King felt his heart skip a beat against the Sea of Bones. Shaking his head, the Palace Lord said, "I'll use a secret skill to check on that lad's location." "Blood Curse Guide." The Palace Lord hollered softly as a dark light shone from his eyes. The dark light spread out like smoke and ink, forming a green rune in midair that emitted a strange energy fluctuation. The Palace Lord exclaimed softly as the rune gradually dissipated. The Blood Crow King asked, "Master, what's wrong?" Frowning, the Palace Lord shook his head. "This doesn't make sense. That lad should have already passed through the sea of bones. How could a Foundation establishment cultivator like him pass through this place? Could there be a background to that lad's identity? The palace lord's eyes flickered as he fell into deep thought. Wait here, I'll go take a look myself. The palace lord of the Blood Crow Palace said to the Blood Crow King. Then, he came to the edge of the sea of bones and chanted a mysterious incantation. Immediately after, the palace lord bit his tongue gently and spat out a drop of essence blood. Under the enhancement of the incantation, that drop of essence blood formed a blood-colored light barrier that enveloped the palace lord's surroundings. The Blood Crow Palace's lord stepped into the sea of bones. After a few steps, the sea of bones seemed to have sensed something, and waves of bones surged. Countless white bones leaped up from the ground, condensing into powerful white bone beasts in midair. They were ferocious and terrifying, and mysterious flames leaped from the holes in their skulls. Roar! A series of roars could be heard from the sea of bones, causing the weather to change. The Blood Crow King, who was standing at the edge of the sea of bones, was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly. With his cultivation, he could clearly feel the terrifying aura emanating from these skeletal beasts. Any one of these white-boned ferocious beasts could easily tear him to pieces if they rushed out. Surrounded by white-boned ferocious beasts, the Blood Crow Palace's lord continued forward with a calm expression. Those white-boned beasts glared at the palace lord and carefully identified the blood mist on the latter's body. After hesitating for a long time, they gradually dispersed and returned to the sea of bones, returning to peace. The moment the palace lord released his secret skill to check on Su Zimo's whereabouts, at the end of the sea of bones, at the foot of a godly mountain, Su Zimo's eyes shone with a faint green color as he felt a sharp pain in his mind. Immediately after, Su Zimo's vision blurred and he caught sight of the blood-robed young man who had died in his hands smiling sinisterly at him once more. The pain and illusion disappeared in a flash. Before long, there was a commotion in the sea of bones behind him, as though someone had barged in. They chased me all the way here. Su Zimo's expression was terrible. Initially, he thought that the primordial forest alone would be enough to stop the pursuers behind him. But now, it seemed like the other party had still entered the sea of bones. Right now, there were only two possibilities. If the other party had the ability to cross the sea of bones, he would definitely die. The second possibility was that the white bone beasts in the sea of bones killed all the pursuers behind him. Su Zimo did not dare to take the risk. Su Zimo looked at the rope that was tied around his body and struggled slightly. However, he realized that there were no signs of loosening at all. Su Zimo sneered internally and burst forth with his blood chi. Rumble. Boom. Boom. His blood surged within his body and a rich demonic chi burst forth. His flesh was filled and his tendons trembled as Su Zimo's body expanded. Buzz! The demon-suppressing rope shone brightly in a resplendent manner, suppressing Su Zimo's blood chi instantly. Ugh! Su Zimo's expression changed as he grunted dully. The demon-suppressing rope did not loosen. Instead, it dug into Su Zimo's flesh and blood seeped out, dyeing his green robes red. Hurriedly, Su Zimo calmed his blood chi and allowed his body to return to normal. The wounds on his body caused by the demon-suppressing rope were nothing much, they were merely superficial wounds. Given Su Zimo's powerful regeneration capabilities, he would be able to recover quickly. However, how he was going to break free was a tricky problem. Su Zimo could not possibly wait here foolishly for the gray-robed cultivator to return and help him undo the demon-suppressing rope. By then, he would probably be a dead man. An idea flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Since he could not break free in a head-on clash, he might as well use tendons and bones transformation. A series of crackling sounds could be heard from Su Zimo's body as his tendons and bones rang together. Su Zimo's body shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo's body shrunk to a height of only a meter. He was extremely short. However, to Su Zimo's shock, the demon-suppressing rope changed as well and shrunk continuously. It was still wrapped tightly around Su Zimo's body and he could not break free at all. That was the power of the demon suppressing rope. That was because demon beasts could change their appearances after cultivating their inner cores. No matter how huge a demon beast was, they could take on a human form. However, once they were bound by the demon suppressing rope, they would not be able to break free no matter how they transformed. Su Zimo was at his wit's end. Right then, Night's spirit closed in and extended its sharp claws that shone with a cold glint. It hooked onto a section of the rope and tore at it repeatedly. A moment later, the demon-suppressing rope snapped. The moment the rope snapped, the glow on the demon-suppressing rope dimmed and it fell from Su Zimo's body. Su Zimo was delighted. Kia! Night's spirit called out hurriedly and turned back, sprinting up the mountain. Su Zimo followed hurriedly. Chapter 237. The gray-robed cultivator tiptoed through the forest, looking nervous and sneaky. He held a folding fan in one hand and a metal rod that was as thick as a finger in the other. At the top of the metal rod, there was a thin needle that spun continuously, guiding the direction. After walking for a while, the gray-robed cultivator would stop in his tracks and wait for the needle at the top of the metal rod to fix on a certain direction before continuing in that direction. Along the way, the gray-robed cultivator did not move quickly. Is this old man's earth spirit ruler reliable? It spins around without a fixed direction. The gray-robed cultivator grumbled as he walked. On the other side, Night's spirit brought Su Zimo through the forest of the godly mountain at an extremely fast speed. As Night's spirit sprinted, his nose twitched as though he was sniffing something as they walked further and further on the godly mountain. A long time later, Night's spirit arrived before a gigantic cave and stopped. Su Zimo raised his head and looked at the cave with a shocked expression. His mouth was agape and he was speechless for a long time. The size of the cave had completely exceeded his imagination. Standing before the entrance of the cave, Su Zimo felt like an ant. Standing before the majestic palace, he felt incomparably small. Who was it that carved out such a gigantic cave in the godly mountain? There were no signs of it being carved out by axes at the edges of the cave. Such methods could be considered as uncanny workmanship. What was the use of such a gigantic cave? Grr! Night's spirit bit Su Zimo's sleeves and continued tugging at him, indicating for him to hurry into the cave. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo could not help but turn back before entering the cave. That single glance caused Su Zimo's gaze to freeze and he could not shift it away. The gigantic cave was halfway up the mountain. Standing there, Su Zimo looked down at the sea of bones from above and his vision was naturally wider. Standing halfway up the mountain, one could vaguely see two rows of stone pillars juxtaposed in the sea of bones. The top of the stone pillars was almost at the same level as the middle of the mountain. From this, one could see how tall the stone pillars were. The top of the two rows of stone pillars were bent towards the middle and embedded into a huge and thick beam. The beam was covered with barbs and was even thicker than the stone pillars. What is this? Su Zimo's eyes flashed with doubt. He had a feeling that the combination of these stone pillars and beams was like something. After pondering for a while, Su Zimo had no clue, so he followed Night's spirit into the cave. At the same time, Blood Crow Palace's lord walked out of the sea of bones safely and heaved a sigh of relief. Blood Crow Palace's lord did not move at all. Focusing his senses, he could not help but scoff coldly, to think that they're still escaping. I want to see where you can run to today. Following the guidance of the blood curse, the palace lord sped towards the divine mountain. Before long, a figure appeared in front of the gigantic cave halfway up the mountain. Wearing gray robes, he held a folding fan in one hand and an earth spirit ruler in the other. Hee, the old man didn't lie to me. Although this earth spirit ruler is a little slow, it didn't make a mistake. I've really found it. Looking at the gigantic cave before him, the gray-robed cultivator could not help but chuckle in delight. If it's meant to be, it will be. If it's not meant to be, don't force it. Shaking his head, the gray-robed cultivator waved his folding fan and muttered gleefully as he walked into the cave. Su Zimo had long noticed that ever since he stepped foot into the primordial ruin, Night Spirit's state was different from usual. He was a little excited and nervous. This was the first time such complicated emotions had appeared on Night Spirit. Back when Hakuya Dojin died, he did not specify whether Night Spirit came from the primordial ruin or the ancient ruin. Su Zimo had once suspected that Night Spirit might have some sort of connection with the primordial ruin. Or perhaps, he could boldly speculate that Night Spirit came from the primordial ruin. After all, throughout his observations, Night Spirit's behavior was way too unusual. The cave was extremely spacious and was almost unobstructed. After a long time, the man and beast finally arrived at the deepest part of the cave. This is, at the end of the cave, there was a grayish-white oval object that was as tall as a person. Su Zimo was dumbfounded as he muttered to himself in disbelief, "That's an egg? What sort of demon beast would give birth to such a gigantic egg?" Arriving before the gigantic egg, Su Zimo reached out to touch it and feel it. There were no patterns on the egg at all. This meant that it had not been born for long, at most a month. In that case, the phenomenon that many cultivators witnessed a month ago should have been caused by the birth of this demon beast egg. Su Zimo recalled everything he knew about the demon beast egg. A moment later, Su Zimo still could not figure out what sort of demon beast could give birth to such a gigantic and frightening egg. The Night Spirit slithered up Su Zimo's clothes and arrived at Su Zimo's chest in a few moments, blinking its beady eyes in a flaunting manner. Su Zimo frowned in deep thought as he looked at the egg before him. He had a feeling that he would be able to get an answer if he connected all the pieces of information along the way. Stone pillars, beams, cave, egg. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. At the thought of that possibility, Su Zimo could not help but be shocked. Initially, Su Zimo was puzzled when he saw the gray stone pillars in the sea of bones. Why were there so many stone pillars in the sea of bones? Furthermore, the surface of those stone pillars was as smooth as jade. Why were there no traces of time left on them after so many years since the primordial era? What sort of stone could be so tough? It was only at this moment that Su Zimo came to a realization. Those were not stone pillars at all. They were skeletons. The skeletons of an existence that was once incomparably strong. Those stone pillars that were arranged in 2 rows were actually the ribs of that powerful living being. The beam in the middle, which was even thicker and full of barbs, was the spine of this creature. It was precisely because they were skeletons that they appeared in the sea of bones. The cave that he was in right now should have been created by the race of that terrifying living being. What sort of a living being could possess such a frightening body? Although its flesh had already rotted after so many years of death, there were no traces left on its bones. They were as smooth as jade and did not decay at all. What was its cultivation realm when it was alive? A primordial being. To think that a primordial being that was already extinct in Tianhuang mainland would be hidden here. If he was not wrong, the gigantic egg before him should have been created by such a primordial being. At that thought, Su Zimo could not help but gulp. Piak! Suddenly, a crisp sound reverberated through the cave. Su Zimo's pupils constricted. The Night Spirit sprawled before his chest had actually reached out with its claws and pierced the gigantic egg before it. Chapter 238. Night Spirit, you. Su Zimo was speechless. Even though the Night Spirit had not been born for a long time, it was extremely intelligent and intelligent. Be it its stunning performance in killing the Jin Dan realm spirit demon in Dongling Valley or its actions after entering the primordial ruin, it was enough to prove that Night Spirit was extraordinary. However, this time round, Su Zimo realized that Night Spirit was in trouble. Furthermore, it was a fatal disaster. It was clear that the egg before him had just been born. In other words, there was a high chance that the unknown primordial life form that laid the egg was nearby. Even though he had not witnessed the terror of the primordial life form personally, he could tell through the forest and sea of bones outside. A single finger from such a terrifying existence was enough to crush him into minced meat. Hia! Night Spirit called out softly, as though it wanted Su Zimo to hug it. Su Zimo's heart was in a mess as he hugged Night Spirit instinctively. Night Spirit craned its neck and only released its claws when it was in front of the gigantic egg. A small hole appeared on the surface of the eggshell, and golden yellow egg juice flowed out of it. It was sparkling and translucent with multicolored light, sparkling and dazzling. Night Spirit opened its mouth hurriedly and sucked at the hole on the eggshell. Gulp. Gulp. Night Spirit gulped down mouthfuls of juice. Why you ate it? Su Zimo's eyes widened in disbelief as he watched everything unfold. Instinctively, Su Zimo wanted to drag Night Spirit away. However, on second thought, even if he took Night Spirit away now, he had already caused a huge disaster. It was clear that the egg was not going to survive. Furthermore, ever since Night Spirit was born, Su Zimo, Monkey, Linghu and Little Crane had tried their best to prepare all sorts of food for it. However, Night Spirit did not seem to be interested. Night Spirit did not touch the flesh of wild beasts, ordinary spirit beasts and spirit demons at all. Night Spirit would only try to eat the flesh of ancient remnant beasts. During this period of time, Night Spirit's body did not grow much and was only slightly larger than before. Its skin was a little rough with faint ripples. It was rare to see Night Spirit so fond of the egg juice. It looked intoxicated and was even gulping it down greedily. Su Zimo's heart softened as he sighed. Forget it, let it eat its fill. The egg juice entered Night Spirit's stomach continuously and the shell turned transparent. One could see the speed at which Night Spirit was gulping down the egg juice. Under Su Zimo's gaze, the Night Spirit's, before it could stop. This demonic beast egg was as tall as a person. How old was Night Spirit? If he had not witnessed it for himself, Su Zimo would not have been able to imagine how Night Spirit's small and skinny body could contain so much egg juice. Night Spirit's stomach was so bloated that it was almost like an airbag. It swayed gently and let out the sound of flowing water. Night Spirit looked at the egg before it with glowing eyes and licked its lips. Aren't you afraid of bursting? Su Zimo shook his head and scolded in amusement. However, it made sense. An opportunity as such would probably never appear again. It was no wonder why Night Spirit was so gluttonous. Since you're done eating, let's hurry and retreat. Let's see if we can escape. Su Zimo had a feeling that the shattering of the egg might have alarmed the terrifying existence in the primordial ruin. Kia! Night Spirit cried out. The moment Night Spirit opened its mouth, it spat out balls of light that were bedazzling and dazzling. The glow contained extremely rich and pure life essence. Su Zimo shuddered. His body was nourished by the glow and he could clearly sense all sorts of strange changes happening in his body. Night Spirit shut its mouth hurriedly and gestured before pointing to the demon beast egg before it. You want me to eat the rest? Su Zimo understood what Night Spirit meant and was shocked. Night Spirit nodded hurriedly, indicating that the egg juice was the most delicious thing and urging Su Zimo to eat it quickly. Su Zimo was a little hesitant. Night Spirit gestured again, indicating that it could no longer eat and it would be a pity to leave the rest of the egg juice here. Su Zimo grit his teeth and made up his mind. Since he had already gotten himself into big trouble, what was there to worry about? Su Zimo placed Night Spirit in his embrace and walked forward. Hugging the gigantic demon beast egg with both hands, he faced the small hole and started gulping down mouthfuls. It's a little fishy and not very delicious. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. A cool and smooth liquid flowed through his throat and into his stomach. Boom! Instantly, Su Zimo felt as though his body was about to explode. The energy contained in the liquid was much greater than Su Zimo had imagined. The moment the energy entered his stomach, it exploded instantly and turned into a divine light that surged through Su Zimo's body, flowing through his limbs and bones. The energy nourished his skin, flesh, tendons, bones, and marrow as well as Su Zimo's organs. At this moment, Su Zimo realized that the liquid in the egg was definitely a great tonic for him. In fact, it was many times more effective than the inner cores of demon beasts. If he could digest all the energy in the liquid, he could even break through to the greater success of organs refinement. Opportunity. This was an unimaginably great opportunity. Of course, the premise of all this was that he could escape from this place. Su Zimo gulped down mouthfuls of the liquid. He finally experienced the feeling of reluctance and unsatiation after Night Spirit stopped swallowing. There was probably nothing in this world that could be purer than the energy in the liquid without any impurities. The energy was way too strong. It rampaged through Su Zimo's body and started spewing out light through his pores. Su Zimo's surroundings were filled with divine light and mist. In the haze, he looked like a god. Su Zimo knew that the energy contained in the liquid was extremely rare. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo hurriedly closed his pores and locked in the essence chi within his body. However, the energy was way too dense. Given Su Zimo's physique, it was difficult for him to contain it within a short period of time. Su Zimo's eyes, ears, nostrils and mouth shone with a resplendent glow that surged with essence chi. It was a frightening sight. Under the pressure of that energy, Su Zimo's eyes shone with a faint green color. Before long, the evil energy hidden in Su Zimo's eyes was forced out by the pure energy in the liquid. That evil energy was left in Su Zimo's body by the blood-robed youth using the blood slave art. 2 drops of faint green liquid dripped down from the corner of Su Zimo's eyes and landed on the ground. They did not dissipate and shone with a faint light. Su Zimo was delighted. He had not expected that the liquid in the demon beast egg would resolve the hidden danger in his body. This meant that as long as Su Zimo escaped from this place, his pursuers would no longer be able to locate him through any secret skills. Chapter 239. Before long, Su Zimo finished the juice of the demon beast egg. Not wanting to waste the essence energy in his body, Su Zimo closed his pores hurriedly and locked his 7 orifices. A warm current surged through his body and he felt as though he was about to explode. The body tempering section, tendons transformation section, bones strengthening section, marrow cleansing section and organs refinement section echoed in Su Zimo's mind. Su Zimo tried his best to calm that energy. A moment later, it was clear that the energy was much calmer and no longer rampaged through his body. Even so, Su Zimo did not dare to open his pores and unlock his 7 orifices rashly. All of a sudden, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He could vaguely sense that someone was sprinting over at an extremely fast speed with their clothes fluttering. Su Zimo's expression changed slightly as he turned back hurriedly. After the gray-robed cultivator entered the cave, he put away the earth spirit ruler. The cave was tall and wide and did not seem like it was created by humans. However, the interior was not complicated. As long as one walked along the cave, they would definitely reach the depths. After walking for a while, the gray-robed cultivator suddenly stopped in his tracks and frowned. Strange, why do I feel that something is amiss? The gray-robed cultivator murmured softly. As he continued forward, he opened his palm and his thumb made contact with his other 4 fingers as he began to deduce. A moment later, the gray-robed cultivator's expression changed starkly as he exclaimed softly, "Something happened? How could this be?" Gritting his teeth, the gray-robed cultivator hastened his footsteps and sprinted towards the depths of the cave. Could someone have beaten me to it and ruined my plans? Who could it be? That's impossible. There were only 2 people who passed through the primordial forest and sea of bones. Furthermore, that green-robed cultivator was bound by my demon-suppressing rope and there's no way he could have broken free. What's the problem? The gray-robed cultivator's mind was in a mess as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. After turning a corner, his vision opened up. A gigantic egg entered his vision. The gray-robed cultivator's initially tensed heart finally calmed down and he heaved a sigh of relief, lamenting to himself, thankfully, I'm not too late. The egg is still here." However, the next moment, the gray-robed cultivator's heart skipped a beat once more. Beside the gigantic egg stood a green-robed cultivator. The green-robed cultivator seemed to have heard his footsteps and suddenly turned around. The clothes on his chest were open, revealing a pitch-black puppy head. The man and the beast both pursed their lips tightly, their expressions strange, as if they were holding their breaths. "It's you." The gray-robed cultivator was stunned. For a moment, he still couldn't understand how the people who had been bound by the demon-binding rope at the foot of the mountain had arrived here first. "It's him." Su Zimo was also stunned. Instantly, Su Zimo realized that the gray-robed cultivator's objective for this trip should be the demon beast egg beside him. Feeling a little guilty, Su Zimo could not help but avoid the gray-robed cultivator's gaze. The gray-robed cultivator's thoughts were all on the demon beast egg and he did not notice Su Zimo's abnormality. As he walked forward, he said, "Fellow Taoist, I don't care how you broke free from the demon-binding rope. However, this egg has to be mine. Of course, given your cultivation, you won't be a match for me if you want to fight for this egg." The gray-robed cultivator was filled with confidence as he glanced sideways at Su Zimo. Su Zimo did not say anything and did not even dare to breathe. Right now, as long as Su Zimo opened his mouth to speak, auspicious colors would spew out with a divine radiance. By then, the gray-robed cultivator had already arrived before the demon beast egg. Sweeping his gaze across it, he frowned slightly and murmured, "Why is there a white spot on it that's even glowing?" His voice stopped abruptly. Suddenly, the gray-robed cultivator could not continue. His eyes were fixated on the small hole on the demon beast egg. His face was livid and his mouth twitched, as though he was on the verge of breaking down. Night Spirit was too young after all and could not hold it in any longer as she opened her mouth and cried out. A rich essence aura flashed by. As though he sensed something, the gray-robed cultivator spun around. Seeing that he could not hide it any longer, Su Zimo could no longer hold it in and spat out a mouthful of turbid air. Immediately after, multicolored light spewed out from Su Zimo's mouth and nose in a dazzling manner. F***ck, when he saw that, there was no way the gray-robed cultivator did not know what was going on. Instantly, he was enraged and nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. Su Zimo did not dare to stay on the spot and hurriedly used Divine Steed Fleeting to speed out of the cave. F***ck, you're still trying to escape? The gray-robed cultivator's eyes were red as he hollered. Waving his arm, the gray-robed cultivator's sleeves expanded and reached first, circling Su Zimo a few times and pulling him back instantly. "Hey, what are you doing?" Su Zimo questioned fiercely. Unexpectedly, the moment he opened his mouth, another mouthful of multicolored light sprayed onto the gray-robed cultivator's face. F***ck, the gray-robed cultivator was so angry that he was trembling. Grabbing Su Zimo's collar, he gritted his teeth and said, "How dare you eat that egg? How dare you F***king eat it? What a waste of a heavenly treasure. Do you know what kind of living being is in that egg?" When Su Zimo saw that the person was in a berserk state, he was afraid that the latter would lose his mind and replied honestly, "I don't know." "You ate it just because you don't know?" Letting go of Su Zimo, the gray-robed cultivator wailed as though his parents had passed away. "Didn't I go through so much trouble to come all the way here just for that egg? But in the end, you F***king ate it. I hate it." At that moment, the gray-robed cultivator even had the thought of dying. This Foundation establishment cultivator that popped out of nowhere had F***ed him badly. If the old man were to know about this, he would definitely be mocked to death. "Lad, just you wait for your death. How dare you eat that egg? Fu. The gray-robed cultivator looked at Su Zimo and sneered. Su Zimo did not say anything. The more the gray-robed cultivator thought about it, the more aggrieved he felt. He closed in again and grit his teeth. "How much did you eat? You're spewing multicolored light from your mouth. How can you eat that much by yourself?" Ugh. Right then, Night Spirit, who was initially hiding in Su Zimo's embrace, suddenly stuck its head out and burped. A few beams of golden light shot out from its nose and mouth as well. F***ck, the gray-robed cultivator rolled his eyes and felt dizzy, nearly fainting. That dog ate that much as well. Why you? The gray-robed cultivator pointed at Suzumo's face, so angry that he could not speak. Suddenly, as though he had thought of something, the gray-robed cultivator hurriedly ran to the egg and waved the folding fan in his hands, smashing the egg into several pieces. There was not much juice left in the egg and only a little was left on the eggshell. I don't care, I'll try it too. The gray-robed cultivator mumbled and could not be bothered anymore. Holding a piece of the eggshell with both hands, he stuck out his tongue and licked it without caring about his image. Chapter 240. Following the guidance of the power of the blood curse, the palace lord arrived at the entrance of a cave halfway up the mountain. This cave entrance, raising his head to look at the gigantic cave entrance, a hint of fear flashed through the depths of the palace lord's eyes as he hesitated. That lad couldn't have really run inside, right? Frowning slightly, the palace lord's gaze flickered and he could not make up his mind for a moment. Given his status, he might not necessarily anger those terrifying living beings if he were to forcefully pass through the primordial forest and sea of bones. At most, he could just reveal his identity at the end. However, if he were to step foot into this cave, he would definitely be killed. Just as the palace lord was hesitating, an extremely terrifying aura came from behind the godly mountain and a bone-chilling killing intent arrived. When he sensed that aura, the palace lord's expression changed. In the depths of the cave, the gray-robed cultivator licked every single eggshell no less than 3 times. The insides of the eggshells were so clean that they could even reflect one's reflection, they could be used as mirrors. Suzumo was dumbfounded. Suzumo lowered his head and glanced at Night Spirit, lamenting internally, even if Night Spirit were to lick it, he wouldn't be able to do it so cleanly. Is this man a dog? How could he have known that just the juice on the eggshells was enough to drive the gray-robed cultivator crazy? That energy was way too pure and rich without any impurities. If it was completely absorbed by the body, the changes it would cause to the body and soul were obvious. Gritting his teeth, the gray-robed cultivator glared at Suzumo and Night Spirit at the side with resentment, getting angrier the more he thought about it. That man and beast had eaten so much that their bodies could no longer contain it. It was such a waste for them to spew out light the moment they opened their mouths. It was one thing for a man to eat it, but to think that he would feed it to a dog. Suzumo, who was standing at the side, frowned as the uneasiness in his heart intensified. He had long wanted to leave this place, but the gray-robed cultivator had no intention of letting him leave. Helpless, Suzumo could only wait and watch as the gray-robed cultivator licked the eggshell like a madman. Looking at how the gray-robed cultivator was about to lick it once more, Suzumo could not hold it in any longer and asked probingly, "Fellow Taoist, why don't you bring these eggshells back and lick them later?" The gray-robed cultivator paused and his lips twitched as his eyes burned with rage. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Why the F asterisk CK did I leave my shell? It's all because of you and that black dog of yours. Without waiting for the gray-robed cultivator to get angry, Suzumo reminded, "Indeed, I don't know what living being is in this egg. However, I do know that if we don't leave now, we'll definitely die." The gray-robed cultivator pursed his lips and licked his lips. The gray-robed cultivator looked askance at Suzumo with a disdainful expression and waved his hand nonchalantly. "Correction, you're the one who's going to die." "I'm not going to die." Suzumo frowned. The gray-robed cultivator seemed to have thought of something and said, "Right, correction. Even if you escape now, it's too late. Since you've already eaten this egg, the living beings here must have been alerted. Even if you escape, you won't be able to escape death. Don't forget, you ate it too." Suzumo pointed to the eggshell in the gray-robed cultivator's hands and sneered, "I don't believe that the living beings here will spare your life." "Foo-foo." The gray-robed cultivator laughed and shook his head. "You don't have to worry about that. I have my own means to leave this place. You can just wait for your death here obediently." When he heard that, Suzumo's mind started racing even though he was expressionless on the surface. Swoosh! Right then, an extremely terrifying aura descended and shrouded the surroundings of the godly mountain, surging in from the entrance of the cave. Roar! 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 Then, a loud and resounding roar came from the sky behind the sacred mountain. The roar was so fast that it almost arrived in front of them in an instant. Su Zimo had lived in Songlang mountain range for an entire year and had seen countless demon beasts. However, he had never heard a roar as such. It was majestic and boundless, sweeping through the 9 heavens in all directions. This roar was filled with endless power and fury. Rumble. Boom. The entire godly mountain began to shake and cracks began to appear in the cave. Countless rocks rolled down and dust flew everywhere. This was a true landslide and earth-rending. Just the roar alone was enough to cause the godly mountain to crack and even show signs of collapsing. Against that terrifying roar, a blood mist burst forth from Su Zimo's body. The surface of his skin cracked and a series of blood scars appeared. It was a ghastly sight. Su Zimo grunted dully and his head felt like it was splitting apart as his face turned pale. The reverberating power of that roar was way too terrifying. Su Zimo's body was much stronger and tougher than most perfected Jin Dan's bodies. But now, against that roar, Su Zimo's body was on the verge of collapsing. His tendons were ruptured and cracks appeared on his bones. Even his organs were dislocated from the shock. If it was before Su Zimo cultivated the organs refinement section, he would have turned into a blood mist instantly against that roar without a corpse. However, when Su Zimo's body was severely injured, the essence energy that was rampaging in his body fused into his flesh, tendons, bones and organs. Initially, Su Zimo's body could not contain so much life essence energy. However, after this serious injury, the essence energy was indirectly sealed in Su Zimo's flesh. He could only wait for the future to refine the energy slowly. Night Spirit's situation was not much better. He was covered in blood from the shock of the roar and was on the verge of death. Even so, Night Spirit did not show any signs of fear. If Su Zimo were to observe carefully, he would have discovered that Night Spirit's gaze was extremely frightening right now. It was pitch black and exuded a faint killing intent. At the same time, a hazy gray fog rose around the gray-robed cultivator. There was an ancient aura within the fog, as though they had returned to the beginning of the world, to an era before chaos was formed. The gray-robed cultivator was the only god within. Jin Dan phenomenon. Although Su Zimo was not a perfected Jin Dan, he could tell the origin of the fog the moment he sensed the aura. Su Zimo had seen 2 Jin Dan phenomenons before. One was the ethereal sword Reign of Spirit Peak's master, Wen Xian. The other was the bone-corroding black wind of a perfected Jin Dan from the mysterious faction. This fog phenomenon was the third one that Su Zimo had seen. Su Zimo could sense that the energy fluctuation of the gray-robed cultivator's Jin Dan phenomenon was clearly much stronger than the previous 2. In fact, Su Zimo had a feeling that even if the previous 2 Jin Dan phenomenons were to join forces, they might not be able to defeat the gray-robed cultivator's Jin Dan phenomenon. The difference between them was obvious. So, that person is a perfected Jin Dan. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Using the spirit-peering art to check the gray-robed cultivator's cultivation realm, it showed that he was at early-stage foundation establishment. That was not accurate at all. Against the roar of the powerful living being, the gray-robed cultivator frowned and was forced to release his Jin Dan phenomenon to defend against it. Chapter 241. The roar did not last for long before it disappeared. However, an even more terrifying aura shrouded the surroundings of the godly mountain. Boom! There was a deafening sound. It was as though a gigantic living being had descended on the peak of the mountain, causing it to shake and look as though it could collapse at any moment. It would be a fool's dream if he wanted to escape at this moment. Su Zimo looked at the gray-robed cultivator. He believed that even if the gray-robed cultivator was perfected Jin Dan, he would not be able to escape. Unhurriedly, the gray-robed cultivator pulled out a gray tattered cloth from his storage bag. In a flash, the gray-robed cultivator arrived at a corner and covered himself with the tattered cloth. Right in front of Su Zimo, the gray-robed cultivator vanished and even his aura dissipated, as though he had fused into the corner without a trace. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Su Zimo would not have believed it. It was as though the gray-robed cultivator had vanished into thin air. However, Su Zimo knew that the gray-robed cultivator was still here and hiding in that corner. Although the tattered cloth looked inconspicuous, it could conceal one's tracks and even aura without being discovered. That was the gray-robed cultivator's trump card. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was the only one left in the depths of the cave. He was all alone with broken eggshells that were licked clean. Anyone who saw that would be able to guess the truth instantly. Su Zimo did not have much time to think. The powerful living being on the godly mountain could descend at any moment. In a flash, Su Zimo arrived at the corner where the gray-robed cultivator was hiding and stood at the side expressionlessly. The gray-robed cultivator who was hiding well was initially waiting to see Su Zimo make a fool of himself. But when he saw that, he was shocked. Although the treasure on his body could conceal his figure and his aura, it could not withstand the impact of power or defend against attacks. If the living being outside the godly mountain were to see everything in the cave, it would definitely lose its rationality and descend into rage. At that moment, if the living being were to release a destructive attack in Su Zimo's direction, he would definitely be implicated as well. Instantly, the gray-robed cultivator understood Su Zimo's intentions. F***CK. What a scam! The gray-robed cultivator cursed inwardly. Even if he attacked Su Zimo now, it would be too late and he would expose himself. The gray-robed cultivator wanted nothing more than to send Su Zimo flying with a kick. However, he had no choice but to unfold the rag and pull Su Zimo in as well. Their figures and auras disappeared in an instant. As soon as this action was completed, a loud rumbling sound rang out as the divine mountain was struck by a huge force. The peak of the mountain was sent flying, and the cave was completely exposed. The moment the Blood Crow Palace's lord sensed the descent of that terrifying aura, he realized that it was already too late for him to leave and would only cause misunderstandings. Fortunately, he didn't enter the cave, so he wouldn't become enemies with the creatures here. Moreover, according to the guidance of the blood curse, Su Zimo was hiding in this cave. By the time the living being of the primordial ruin arrived, that lad would have nowhere to run and would definitely die if he was trapped in this cave. If everything went smoothly, the other party should not make things difficult for him after he revealed his identity. He would also be able to leave this place unscathed, and this trip would be more daunting than dangerous. Roar! 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 Just as the Blood Crow Palace's lord had expected, a series of powerful roars followed right after the terrifying aura, piercing through the clouds and shattering rocks. A few breaths later, the primordial living being had descended on the divine mountain. Even though he was mentally prepared, the Blood Crow Palace's lord's pupils still constricted and his heart thumped furiously when he caught sight of the primordial living being with his own eyes. The primordial living being did not reveal its full appearance. However, it was only half of its body that was hovering above the divine mountain, almost covering the entire divine mountain that towered into the clouds. The massive and thick body coiled around the divine mountain once. It was a few thousand feet long and was filled with green scales that shone with a cold glint. Clang! Clang! A pair of huge claws protruded from the bottom of the body. Their bones protruded out and they were extremely sharp. They dug into the sacred mountain and instantly pierced through it. The horns on the primordial living being's head were prominent. Looking down from above, it glared with a pair of eyes that emitted a cold glint filled with killing intent. The primordial living being had whiskers beneath its chin and opened its mouth wide, revealing terrifying sharp teeth. Sticky saliva dripped from the sides of its mouth as it looked menacing. Dragon! That was a true dragon. The Blood Crow Palace's lord had once seen the form of a dragon in some of the ancient books in his clan. However, he was still extremely shocked now that he was seeing it for himself. The descriptions in the ancient books could not even compare to a 10,000th of what he was seeing with his own eyes. At most, the appearance in the ancient books was similar. However, the unique might and aura of dragons was not something that could be described with mere words. If Su Zimo could see that divine dragon right now, he would definitely recall something. Back before they entered the primordial ruin, the gray-robed cultivator had once said in a serious manner, "I've even seen a true dragon. Even though it's just a small portion of its claws, it's still shocking enough. That single scale is larger than our bodies, and those claws are even longer and sharper than our flying swords." Back then, nobody took those words seriously. However, upon closer inspection, the appearance of the divine dragon was even better than what the gray-robed cultivator had described. The divine dragon did not use much strength, and instantly, half of the divine mountain was sent flying. Everything in the depths of the cave was exposed to the divine dragon. The moment the Blood Crow Palace's lord took a look, his face turned pale and blood drained. There was no one. The depths of the cave were in a mess. A gigantic dragon egg was smashed into pieces and the juice within was gone. Even the eggshell was licked clean. However, there was no one. To be precise, there was someone else, him. A dragon egg was eaten by someone. Apart from the divine dragon that had just arrived, he was the only one left at the scene. There was no way he could explain himself. The Blood Crow Palace's lord was stunned. This was completely different from what he had expected. When the divine dragon caught sight of the eggshell scattered on the ground, its eyes surged with endless killing intent and rage that was about to spew out. Suddenly, the Blood Crow Palace's lord felt a chilling killing intent surge towards him. "No, it's not me," the Blood Crow Palace's lord was completely flustered. Although he was at the Void Reversion realm and could be called a Void Reversion Dao being with almost no opponents in the Great Zhou dynasty, he was still doomed against an adult dragon. The gray-robed cultivator who was hiding in the corner was stunned as well. Why was there another person here? This person is quite skilled and is a professional scapegoat. To think that he would rush over at this moment. What an accurate timing. The gray-robed cultivator muttered internally. Su Zimo and the other man hid in the corner motionlessly, not daring to lift the rag to check out the situation outside. However, when he heard the commotion outside, Su Zimo had a rough idea of what was going on. Just now, the person who was speaking should be the one chasing after him. Su Zimo wanted to lift the rag to check out the person's appearance and see what this primordial living being was. However, he maintained his rationality and held himself back. At this moment, any slight movement could expose the both of them. Dragons. Could the primordial living being outside be dragons? Could dragons truly exist in this world? At that moment, Su Zimo had an urge to lift the rag and take a look at the appearance of the dragons. However, Su Zimo resisted the urge. When he was studying in Pingyang Town, he had heard many legends about dragons. Those legends were illusory and without any basis, they were merely myths that were passed down among the commoners. Su Zimo had never taken them seriously. In fact, before he met perfected being Tsang Lang, he did not believe that there were immortals in this world. Later on, Su Zimo embarked on the path of cultivation and was able to enter Misty Peak. In Misty Peak, Su Zimo had read some ancient books. There were almost no records of dragons in those books. Even if there were, they were extremely vague and limited. Piecing together the ancient books, one could obtain some limited information. Dragons were extremely terrifying living beings of the primordial era. They did not belong to the demon race and were a unique race known as dragons. According to legends, dragons were extremely strong and were incomparably glorious in the primordial era, reigning over the ages. However, for some unknown reason, dragons were destroyed in the long river of time and had long gone extinct, turning into legends. Su Zimo was still skeptical towards those records. In his opinion, since dragons once had such a dazzling and glorious civilization, they must have left some traces of their existence in Tianhuang mainland. Prior to this, Su Zimo had never seen one before. Until earlier on, Su Zimo's mind suddenly recalled the gigantic skeleton he caught a glimpse of in the sea of bones that seemed to stretch through the entire sea of bones. Could that be a dragon skeleton? When he thought of that possibility, Su Zimo was shocked. Frowning, Su Zimo recalled what just now said, and another question flashed through his mind. 9 races? What's the 9 races that he's talking about? On the other side, when the gray-robed cultivator heard that, a glint flashed through his eyes before disappearing instantly. He's someone from the 9 races. Blood pattern curse, could it be? The gray-robed cultivator's gaze flickered as he guessed the identity of the Blood Crow Palace's lord. So what if he's someone from the 9 races? Even if you're a pure-blooded bastard with an impure bloodline, you'll definitely die if you dare to come here and eat the descendants of dragons. Suddenly, a deep and powerful voice sounded from the void. Every single word was like a thunderclap that shook one's mind. Swoosh! The divine dragon swung its tail. The dragon tail that was filled with green scales was like a thick divine whip that slammed towards the Blood Crow Palace's lord with an apocalyptic might. Ah! The Blood Crow Palace's lord was shocked as he exclaimed. Before the dragon tail arrived, a suffocating aura of death had already surged over. Biting his tongue gently, the Blood Crow Palace's lord spat out a mouthful of essence blood. After spitting out that mouthful of essence blood, the Blood Crow Palace's lord seemed to have weakened significantly as his eyes dimmed and he looked dispirited. Even if he could survive the divine dragon's tail after spitting out that mouthful of essence blood, he would have to recuperate for dozens of years before he could recover fully. Go! The Blood Crow Palace's lord chanted a series of obscure incantations as he waved his blood-colored bone staff and pointed forward. The blood light transformed into a gigantic skeleton that bit towards the dragon tail. At the same time, the Blood Crow Palace's lord took out a bunch of talismans from his storage bag and crushed them all. A pained expression appeared in the Blood Crow Palace's lord's eyes. He had collected those talismans for many years and had not expected that he would have to use them all in a single round. He was truly aggrieved in this battle. Initially, he was just chasing after a mere Foundation establishment cultivator without any suspense. However, for some unknown reason, he was completely passive throughout the entire process and did not even manage to touch the sleeves of his opponent. It was as though he was led by the nose. For some reason, he ended up here, and even got targeted by a divine dragon. Chapter 243. Boom! The dragon's tail slammed heavily against the skull that was condensed, letting out a deafening bang in midair. Almost instantly, the skull was shattered by the dragon's tail and scattered into the world. Swoosh! The dragon's tail did not stop there as it whipped the palace lord viciously once more. Bang! 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 Even with the many talismans stacked together, they could not defend against the ferocity of the divine dragon's tail whip. The palace lord's glabella shone brightly as he released an incomparably strong spirit consciousness to defend against it with all his might. Bang! Like a kite with a broken string, the palace lord was sent flying instantly, falling from the waist of the mountain before crashing heavily onto the ground, stirring up a layer of dust. Exclamation point. The palace lord spat out a mouthful of blood and the blood drained from his face. His gaze was dim and many of his bones were fractured while his organs were ruptured. If he had not fought with all his might at the end, that tail whip would have turned him into a blood mist. The difference was way too great. They were not on the same level at all. It's true, it wasn't me. I just arrived and didn't enter at all. The palace lord endured the intense pain all over his body and gasped with a trembling voice. Who else could it be if it wasn't you? The divine dragon coiled in midair and looked down at the palace lord, questioning loudly. Its eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. Blood Crow Palace's lord took a deep breath of air. Fellow Taoist of the dragon race, please listen to me. Initially, I came here in pursuit of someone. He must be the one who ate your descendant. He's the true culprit. I believe that he must have used some sort of camouflage to be here. He must not have gone far. When they heard that, Su Zimo and the gray-robed cultivator who were hiding in the corner felt their hearts skip a beat. They were so scared that they did not even dare to breathe loudly. The gray-robed cultivator knew that things were bad. While his tattered cloth did have the ability to camouflage, it was a little opportunistic. Be it the fact that the dragon egg was stolen or eaten, the divine dragon would definitely go berserk and lose its rationality after receiving such a blow. The first thing it would do was to search for the culprit. With the tattered cloth to hide their bodies and auras, it was easy for them to escape. Furthermore, the divine dragon would not have expected them to hide in the cave instead of leaving right away. This was a psychological blind spot. However, the gray-robed cultivator had not expected that Blood Crow Palace's lord would appear out of nowhere in the already chaotic situation. This person had chased Su Zimo all the way here. Relying on the blood curse power, he had deduced that Su Zimo was in this cave. That was the reason why the palace lord of Blood Crow Palace said that. If the dragons were to turn around and search the cave carefully, the tattered cloth on the gray-robed cultivator's body would be nothing more than a decoration. It would be easy for this rag to escape the detection of Jinren Jin Dan or even Jinying Jinjuan. However, trying to hide from the detection of an adult dragon was nothing more than a pipe dream. After the Blood Crow Palace's lord finished his words, the outside suddenly fell into silence. The atmosphere became extremely strange. The world seemed to have come to a standstill. A look of determination flashed through the gray-robed cultivator's eyes as he reached for his storage bag and put away the rag. At this time, if he wanted to continue hiding, he would only be deceiving himself. A talisman appeared in the gray-robed cultivator's palm. Lesser Transference Talisman. This was a type of talisman from the ancient era that had been lost by now. Even in the ancient era, the Lesser Transference Talisman was extremely rare and was extremely famous. Shredding the Lesser Transference Talisman could teleport a person thousands of miles away instantly. Although the landing point was uncertain, this kind of ability was enough to make every cultivator's heart beat faster. That was because it meant that cultivators with the Lesser Transference Talisman could escape from danger instantly and escape with their lives. The value of the Lesser Transference Talisman was self-evident. Every time one was used, there would be one less. For the current cultivation world, the Lesser Transference Talisman was priceless and could not be bought no matter how many spirit stones one spent. To be fair, the gray-robed cultivator's original plan did not involve the use of the Lesser Transference Talisman at all. However, the situation was pressing and he would lose his life if he did not use it now. The moment the gray-robed cultivator put away the rag, the two of them were exposed and stood in the deepest corner of the cave. Blood Crow Palace's lord blinked his green eyes and caught sight of Su Zimo for the first time. As for Su Zimo, this was also the first time he caught sight of this person who was chasing after him. Although it was a short time, both of them remembered each other immediately. The next moment, Su Zimo caught sight of the primordial life form that was hovering in midair. Psst! Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and his pupils constricted as he gasped. It was way too shocking. If he had not witnessed it personally, Su Zimo would not have imagined that a life form could grow to such an extent and exude such a terrifying might and aura. In front of this primordial life form, Su Zimo actually felt a sense of insignificance and had the urge to prostrate in worship. It was as though the other party was incomparably noble and supreme. That thought suddenly surged into his mind, as though it came from the depths of his bloodline and was deeply rooted. Su Zimo frowned. He was extremely disgusted by that feeling. Unless Su Zimo was willing to do so, he would not bend his knees to anyone, nor would he bend his spine. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes with a burning gaze. Against the might of the divine dragon, he puffed out his chest with a hint of killing intent and sharpness in his brows. The moment that feeling of inferiority surged, Su Zimo extinguished it. The change in Su Zimo's body was extremely brief and happened almost instantly. However, the gray-robed cultivator still noticed it. The gray-robed cultivator looked deeply at Su Zimo. For the first time, he felt that this green-robed cultivator was not simple. He was the only one who knew how difficult it was to break free from the might and aura of the dragons. Not only did it require an indestructible will, it also required a confidence that bordered on arrogance and a domineering aura that looked down on the world. There might be some cultivators who could fulfill one of those conditions. However, there were only a handful of people who fulfilled all three conditions. Su Zimo before him was one of them. If Su Zimo had already impressed the gray-robed cultivator, the black and ugly puppy in Su Zimo's embrace was even more unbelievable. How is that possible? The gray-robed cultivator's eyes were filled with disbelief. There was no fear in the night spirit's eyes at all against the divine dragon that was circling in the skies with divine light and towering horns. The night spirit hid most of its body in Su Zimo's embrace and only revealed a pair of pitch-black eyes. It had a calm expression as it glared at the divine dragon in midair coldly. The night spirit's gaze was a little strange and gave the gray-robed cultivator an indescribable feeling. The gray-robed cultivator remembered that gaze the entire time. Many years later, when the gray-robed cultivator found out about the origins of the night spirit, he recalled that gaze and came to a realization. Chapter 244. The gray-robed cultivator had always harbored a huge grudge against Su Zimo. If not for this person, he would have stolen the dragon egg a long time ago and escaped unscathed. How glorious would that be for a divine dragon to be born in the future? But now, not only was the dragon egg gone, even his most precious and rare treasure, the minor transference talisman, was used. I've suffered a huge loss this time round. The gray-robed cultivator cursed internally. After crushing the minor transference talisman, his first reaction was to send Su Zimo flying with a kick. He was filled with hatred. If not for that green-robed cultivator, would he have ended up in such a state? However, when the gray-robed cultivator sensed the changes just now in Su Zimo's body and the night spirit's gaze, he changed his mind at the last minute. He decided to take the green-robed cultivator and the black dog away. That's the minor transference talisman. Blood Crow Palace's lord focused his gaze and instantly recognized the origin of the talisman. The minor transference talisman shattered. An extremely strange energy fluctuation burst forth from the gray-robed cultivator's palm. The entire space trembled violently. Immediately after, a gigantic vortex appeared behind the gray-robed cultivator. Its center was dark and deep, resembling a black hole. A powerful suction force acted on the gray-robed cultivator. Before he was pulled into the black hole, the gray-robed cultivator reached out and grabbed Su Zimo's arm, pulling him in as well. Although the entire process seemed slow on the surface, it happened in the blink of an eye. Swoosh! Both of them were devoured by the black hole and vanished from where they were. Almost at the same time, the divine dragon that was initially in midair turned into a gigantic green beam of light and descended on the waist of the mountain, causing the entire godly mountain to crumble on the spot. Although the divine dragon's speed was fast, it was still a step too slow. Roar! The divine dragon was enraged and opened its gigantic mouth. Saliva dripped down and it let out a resounding dragon roar that reverberated through the world. Around the divine dragon's head, the sound seemed corporeal and condensed into ripples that spread in all directions, sweeping through the entire primordial ruin. Countless corpses in the sea of bones were so shocked that they jumped. Many strange skeletal beasts seemed to have been summoned, and all of them woke up. Even the bone dragon that pierced through the sea of bones was shaking its enormous body, wanting to soar into the sky. Just as the dragon's roar fell, another dragon's roar faintly came from a valley surrounded by a huge mountain range behind the sacred mountain. The dragon roar that came from the valley was neither loud nor resounding. However, it was filled with the richness of time, dignified and majestic. Ugh! The palace lord grunted and his expression turned even uglier. The dragon roar that came from the valley was faintly discernible, but it almost shattered his essence spirit. The numerous ferocious beasts made of white bones that had just formed in the sea of bones collapsed in an instant, shattering into numerous bone fragments that scattered all over the ground. The two dragon roars intertwined in the void, as if they were communicating something. The divine dragon in the sky above the divine mountain was extremely furious and roared crazily. The dragon's roar in the valley seemed to want to stop it. The dispute between the two sides became more and more intense. In the end, the divine dragon let out a final roar and turned into a ray of green light. It disappeared from the sky above the divine mountain and sped away from the sea of bones. There were many cultivators standing outside the primordial forest, pacing back and forth. Those cultivators were extremely cautious and did not dare to enter the primordial forest rashly. However, they were indignant to leave just like that. Before long, a loud roar sounded from the direction of the primordial ruin. A small number of cultivators frowned and sensed that something was amiss. A look of fear flashed through their eyes as they turned and left the place. However, most of the cultivators were excited and discussed fervently. They soared into the air and peered into the ruins repeatedly. That sound is so strange. I wonder what kind of ferocious beast it is. Judging from the sound, that ferocious beast isn't weak. It must be a ferocious beast from the primordial era and might have already gone extinct in Tianhuang mainland. If that ferocious beast dares to appear, I'll definitely take it down and sign a blood oath with it. Before long, a massive divine dragon with horns and a towering body crossed the sea of bones and the primordial forest. It arrived in midair aggressively and looked down at the vast land from above, emitting a terrifying might and aura as its eyes were filled with killing intent. Everyone was shocked. The cultivators who were initially in midair felt their limbs go cold and fell to the ground one after another. Thump! Thump! The cultivators who were standing on the spot knelt down one after another. Thousands of cultivators shuddered under the shroud of the vast dragon might. Their faces were pale and they kept quiet out of fear. Just now, the cultivator who said that he wanted to take down the ferocious beast was so scared that he peed and shit himself as he knelt on the ground and kowtowed with all his might. Roar! The divine dragon reared its head and roared. Poof! 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 Outside the primordial forest, thousands of cultivators exploded one after another, turning into meat paste and blood mists. They died on the spot. Just now, some of the cultivators who left were scared silly when they saw that from afar. It was way too tragic. Thousands of cultivators, including perfected Jean Dan, could not even withstand the roar of the divine dragon. In the blink of an eye, the area outside the primordial forest turned into a Shura hell with corpses and rivers of blood. The divine dragon hated those cultivators to the core. In its eyes, those people were no different from the two who escaped earlier on. The divine dragon sensed carefully once more before rising into the air. Soaring into the 9 heavens with a murderous aura, it sped into the distance and disappeared from the skies above the primordial ruin before long. It was only at this moment that the palace lord heaved a sigh of relief. He survived. Lying on the ground, the palace lord felt surreal and was in a daze. Thankfully, the divine dragon escaped in the end or he would have died for sure. Standing up with great difficulty, the palace lord leaned on his blood-colored bone staff and dragged his severely injured body through the sea of bones, returning to the primordial forest. Master! The Blood Crow King had been waiting here for a long time. When he caught sight of the palace lord's tragic state, his expression changed as he hurried forward to support the latter. How did this happen? The Blood Crow King was stunned. Gritting his teeth, the palace lord's eyes were filled with endless hatred and he was so angry that he was trembling. It was only at this moment that he gradually regained his senses. Right from the start of this pursuit, he had already fallen into Su Zimo's trap. In the end, not only did he not manage to kill the lad personally, he even nearly lost his life. It was a complete failure. His injuries were extremely severe and he would most likely need dozens of years of recuperation before he could recover to his original state. Su Zimo, Fufufu, you have to live on well and don't let anything happen to you. The moment I return will be the moment you die. The palace lord's expression was grim as he let out a series of laughter with a vicious gaze. The Blood Crow King stood at the side, not daring to make a sound. A long time later, the palace lord took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Let's go back to Black Crow Mountain. Master, your injuries are too severe. It'll be difficult for us to pass through this primordial forest." Get your clansmen here. Even if those blood crows die here, you have to pave a path for me. After a moment of silence, the Blood Crow King nodded. Understood. Chapter 245. Suddenly, a gigantic black hole appeared in the void thousands of kilometers away from the primordial ruin. Two figures fell out of it and landed heavily on the ground, causing dust to fly everywhere. Su Zimo's physique was strong and he did not feel anything. Ouch! However, the gray-robed cultivator cried out in pain. Although he was a perfected being Jean Dan, his physique was not as strong as Su Zimo's. At that moment, he was grimacing and gasping from the fall. Surveying his surroundings, Su Zimo realized that they had already left the primordial ruin and arrived at a completely foreign place. Minor Transference Talisman. Su Zimo's gaze flickered as he murmured softly. He knew nothing about talismans and this was the first time he had heard of the name of the talisman. However, the ability displayed by the Minor Transference Talisman was an eye-opener for Su Zimo. Spatial teleportation. In Tianhuang mainland, most cultivators would have to set up teleportation formations in advance if they wanted to teleport. The higher the level of the teleportation formation, the further the distance it could teleport. Su Zimo had never thought that a seemingly simple talisman would be able to activate spatial teleportation. To be fair, if he did not have the Minor Transference Talisman in that environment, it would have been impossible for him and the gray-robed cultivator to escape. In Su Zimo's mind, he recalled that fleeting glimpse before he left the primordial ruin. Its massive, slender body was covered in green scales that looked like they were made of molten steel. Its head was menacing and its claws were sharp, every single part of its body was filled with explosive power. That resounding roar that could pierce through metal and stone could probably only be described as a dragon's roar. Was that really a dragon? Su Zimo looked at the gray-robed cultivator and could not help but ask. Everything that he had experienced today had completely exceeded Su Zimo's understanding of this world, the cultivation world and Tianhuang mainland. Even at this moment, Su Zimo could not believe that a living dragon had appeared before him. Furthermore, he was nearly killed by that dragon. When he heard Su Zimo's question, the gray-robed cultivator rolled his eyes and sneered, "What else did you think it was?" It really was a dragon. In the distant past, there was an incomparably powerful race called the dragons. Then, Su Zimo thought of something. Since that green creature was a dragon, then the huge egg in the depths of the cave was a dragon egg. I actually ate a dragon. Su Zimo was shocked. Or, more accurately, half of it. The other half was eaten by Night Spirit. The more the gray-robed cultivator thought about it, the more aggrieved he felt. When he heard Su Zimo mumbling to himself at the side, he was even more enraged and could not help but stand up. Leaning forward, he glared at Su Zimo and gritted his teeth. You know that you ate a dragon too? Of all things to eat, why did you choose to eat dragon eggs? If you don't eat that egg and I steal it, it will definitely give birth to a divine dragon. Now, I haven't gotten anything. Before Su Zimo could react, Night Spirit who was hiding in his embrace suddenly extended its sharp claws with a cold gaze. It was as though it would attack without hesitation if the gray-robed cultivator made any strange movements. The moment Night Spirit extended its claws, the gray-robed cultivator felt a chill run down his spine. Sensing it, the gray-robed cultivator lowered his head and glared at Night Spirit, hollering, "Why? Black dog, are you trying to bite me? Look at how arrogant you are, eh?" Looking at Night Spirit's claws, the gray-robed cultivator narrowed his eyes and exclaimed softly. The thickness of Night Spirit's claws was almost the same as the hole on the dragon egg. Great! Enlightened, the gray-robed cultivator said, "After all this time, you were the one who attacked first, Black Dog." When Night Spirit saw that the gray-robed cultivator was in a frenzy and did not seem hostile, it ignored him and continued sprawling in Su Zimo's embrace with its eyes half-closed. The gray-robed cultivator's gaze lingered on Night Spirit and he fell into deep thought. Initially, the gray-robed cultivator thought that Night Spirit was just a dog. He even mocked Su Zimo for rearing a mutt as his spirit beast. However, from the looks of it, Night Spirit was not as simple as it seemed. Even ancient remnant beasts or pure-blooded ferocious beasts might not dare to eat a dragon egg, let alone a mutt. However, no matter how the grey-robed cultivator thought about it, he could not think of any demon beast that could match up to Night Spirit. Rubbing his chin, the grey-robed cultivator rolled his eyes and a thought crossed his mind. Right then, Su Zimo asked from the side, "I'm Su Zimo from Misty Peak. Fellow Daoist, may I know your name?" Lin Xuanji. Most of the grey-robed cultivator's attention was on Night Spirit and he did not think much before replying. Su Zimo nodded and cupped his fists solemnly. "Thank you for saving me this time round, fellow Daoist. If there's a chance, I'll definitely repay you in the future." "There's no need for the future. Right now will do." Lin Xuanji smiled and pointed to Night Spirit in Su Zimo's embrace. "Fellow Daoist, how about giving me that mutt of yours as a form of repayment?" Even though Lin Xuanji could not tell the origin of Night Spirit, he could tell that this little thing had immense potential. Even if it was a true mutt, it would be able to transform into a ferocious and terrifying spirit beast after eating half of the dragon egg. Lin Xuanji could vaguely sense that if he could take Night Spirit away, he would definitely be able to make up for his losses this time round. Night Spirit? Su Zimo froze for a moment. He had not expected that Lin Xuanji would target Night Spirit. Su Zimo smiled. "It's not a problem if I agree. However, there's no way Night Spirit will leave with you." "Hee hee." Lin Xuanji chuckled strangely and asked, "Does that mean you agree?" "If you agree, we'll be even and we won't owe each other anything." "How about that?" "Sure," Su Zimo nodded and snickered internally. He knew Night Spirit's temperament the best. The grey-robed cultivator would definitely be at a disadvantage if he dared to target it. "Great." Lin Xuanji patted Su Zimo on the shoulder and said, "As long as you agree, leave the rest to me. I'll show you what I'm capable of." Su Zimo smiled without saying anything. Lin Xuanji came before Night Spirit and asked with a grin, "Little black dog, want to come with me?" Night Spirit ignored him and closed its eyes, as though it had fallen asleep. Lin Xuanji raised the folding fan in his hands and tapped Night Spirit on the head, chiding softly, "You sure know how to act, little fella." Just as the folding fan was about to land on Night Spirit's head, Night Spirit suddenly woke up. Night Spirit raised its head and bit down on Lin Xuanji's folding fan, letting out a threatening growl from the depths of its throat. "Hey!" Lin Xuanji panicked and retracted his folding fan hurriedly. Night Spirit bit down hard and refused to let go. "Don't!" Lin Xuanji flapped the folding fan in his hands so wildly that his arm was almost dislocated before he managed to fling Night Spirit away. Su Zimo swept his gaze across Lin Xuanji's folding fan without batting an eyelid. That folding fan was a treasure. Given Night Spirit's bite strength, it could even snap the demon suppressing rope. However, it did not leave a single mark on the folding fan. Chapter 246. You rabid dog. Lin Xuanji nearly broke out in cold sweat. Although this little thing did not look big and seemed like it had just been born, it was strong and nearly yanked the folding fan away from his hands. The folding fan in Lin Xuanji's hands had a powerful background and was a symbol of his lineage. If he lost it, he might not be able to keep his life. Furthermore, he could not afford to embarrass himself like that. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he was. What if Night Spirit snatched the folding fan away? What was he going to tell the old man? He was going to say that the folding fan was lost and taken away by a dog. The old man would definitely whip him to death. At that thought, Lin Xuanji glared at Night Spirit angrily. Naturally, Night Spirit was fearless and returned the glare. The man and beast glared at each other. After a moment, Lin Xuanji finally gave in and revealed a friendly smile. "Rabid dog, cough, cough. Night Spirit, what do you think this is?" With that, he withdrew a small bottle from his storage bag and removed the cork. Instantly, a rich medicinal fragrance wafted out. There was even a faint smell of blood mixed within the medicinal fragrance. Blood-flesh elixir. The blood-flesh elixir was created by refining the essence of a demon beast's flesh and supplemented with many spirit herbs. It was the favorite of demon beasts. The grade of the blood-flesh elixir depended on the grade of the demon beast it was refined with. The blood-flesh elixir before him was not of a low grade, it could be a grade 2 or even grade 3 elixir. Although Su Zimo had dabbled in elixir refinement, to be fair, he could only refine grade 1 elixirs. Furthermore, ever since the Five Peaks face-off, he did not intend to spend any more effort on elixir refinement. He had to make a choice. As the grade of the elixir increased, the requirements for the refinement technique increased and the contents of the elixir recipe became more complicated. Su Zimo was not a god and did not have the time or energy to do so. The path he had to take was arduous and filled with thorns. Given the foundation of both immortality and demonic cultivation, Su Zimo could only choose weapon refinement. If it was Linghu or Little Crane, they would have pounced on the blood-flesh elixir in a frenzy the moment they caught sight of it. Who cares? I'll eat it first. However, Night Spirit's reaction was very calm. He glanced at the bottle of blood and flesh pills and curled his lips. His eyes were full of disdain. F***CK. Lin Xuanji was triggered. He felt that his self-esteem had been insulted and trampled upon. I was actually looked down upon by a dog. Lin Xuanji was so angry that his entire body shook and his eyes turned red. Su Zimo smiled and patted Lin Xuanji on the shoulder, saying earnestly, "You'll get used to it." Lin Xuanji was indignant as he took out another pile of treasures from his storage bag. There were countless elixirs and elixirs that glowed with resplendent lights and a fragrant aroma, there were even inner cores of demon beasts. Night Spirit narrowed her eyes and laid lazily on Su Zimo's chest, ignoring Lin Xuanji. Lin Xuanji felt indignant. A moment later, Lin Xuanji could not take it any longer and crept closer to Su Zimo sneakily, whispering, "Fellow Taoist, what does this mad dog like? Tell me." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he nodded. "I can tell you, but you'll have to give me something in exchange." "What is it?" Lin Xuanji retreated half a step with a wary expression. "That minor transference talisman, do you have any more?" "Sell me a few," Su Zimo said. Lin Xuanji nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. When Su Zimo saw that Lin Xuanji's expression was terrible and his body was trembling, seemingly on the verge of breaking down, he added hurriedly, "I'm buying it with spirit stones, I'm not robbing you. Fellow Taoist, you're too hot-tempered." Su Zimo did not know how precious the minor transference talisman was and merely thought that it was a type of talisman that had a price. Lin Xuanji's mouth twitched as he glared at Su Zimo coldly. Grinding his teeth, he said word by word, "I only have one and you want a few. Do you think that minor transference talismans are cabbages that can be bought by the roadside?" Lin Xuanji roared out the last sentence. After roaring, Lin Xuanji panted heavily, still indignant. He looked at Night Spirit and said, "Night Spirit, your master is way too ignorant. What can you develop with him?" Lin Xuanji waved his arms in high spirits and declared loudly, "Let me tell you, if you follow me from now on, I guarantee that you'll have anything you want and eat anything you want." Kia! When he heard that, Night Spirit suddenly opened his eyes and called out softly, seemingly moved. Lin Xuanji's voice stopped abruptly. "Ha! There's a reaction." Delighted, Lin Xuanji looked at Su Zimo and asked excitedly, "Fellow Taoist, what did Night Spirit say earlier on?" Su Zimo held back his laughter and replied, "Night Spirit said that he wanted to eat dragon eggs and asked if you could get him some." Lin Xuanji, why you? You guys, Lin Xuanji pointed at Su Zimo and Night Spirit with a trembling voice. His nose was crooked from anger. He felt that he was going to break down if he continued to stay with this man and beast duo. "Humph, take care of yourselves." Lin Xuanji flicked his sleeves angrily and soared into the air, speeding into the distance. "No matter what, thank you, fellow Taoist." When Su Zimo saw that Lin Xuanji was about to disappear, he shouted hurriedly. That was truly Su Zimo's heartfelt words. If not for Lin Xuanji, he would have died in the primordial ruin long ago. When he heard that, Lin Xuanji, who was initially speeding in midair, felt his legs go limp and he almost fell. Su Zimo had gained quite a bit from this trip. Not only did he get rid of the remaining power of blood slave art in his body, he even ate a dragon egg. However, he did not gain anything. All he did was eat some leftover egg juice. Lin Xuanji sped against the wind and felt increasingly aggrieved the more he thought about it. He had cultivated for dozens of years and was the successor of the top faction of Tianhuang mainland. When had he ever suffered as such? That person must be the reincarnation of a jinx. Why am I so unlucky when I'm with him? A disciple of Misty Peak? I've got to deduce what that person's background is and what secrets he has. With that said, Lin Xuanji took a deep breath of air and a gray haze appeared in his eyes. Gradually, it spread out and turned into a faint mist that filled his eyes. Lin Xuanji extended his palm and his thumb touched his other 4 fingers repeatedly at an extremely fast speed. A mysterious power circled around Lin Xuanji's fingertips. A long time later, Lin Xuanji shuddered and the gray haze in his eyes dissipated. He muttered to himself in shock, how is that possible? I can't deduce it. Lin Xuanji frowned with a grim expression. That person is only a Foundation establishment cultivator. How can I not deduce it? That doesn't make sense. Could it be that someone is hiding from the heavenly secrets? Lin Xuanji narrowed his eyes and murmured, there's a supreme expert behind that lad. Chapter 247. After Lin Xuanji left, Su Zimo took out the map and compared it carefully. A moment later, Su Zimo was shocked to discover that he was at the center of the Great Zhou dynasty and was less than 5 kilometers away from the capital. He was teleported to the vicinity of the capital of Great Zhou after summoning the minor transference talisman in the primordial ruin. After the battle at Dongling Valley, Su Zimo was fleeing and was getting further and further away from Misty Peak. If he did not have any other methods, given Su Zimo's Foundation establishment cultivation, it would take him a few months to return to Misty Peak even if he traveled day and night without rest. Worried about the safety of everyone at Misty Peak, Su Zimo pondered for a moment and decided to head to the capital first to check out if he could get some information. Putting away the map, Su Zimo brought Night Spirit and sword into the air on his sword, speeding in the direction of the capital. An hour later, a towering black city wall appeared at the boundary between the heavens and the ground. The city wall rose from the ground and extended to the left and right without an end in sight. Just by looking at it from afar, one could sense the majesty of the city. It was like a primordial divine dragon lying on the horizon. Is this the capital of Great Zhou? The closer he got to the city, the more he could sense its majesty. Compared to the city before him, the capital of Yan country was like comparing a mansion to a city, the difference was huge. When he got closer, he could clearly see the traces of wind, frost, rain and snow on the surface of the city wall. It was mottled and old. However, the city still stood there, indestructible and unshakable for countless years. That was because this was the center of the Great Zhou dynasty. It was the capital of the dynasty where the emperor resided. In the direction of Su Zimo's city wall, there were 3 tall city gates with many guards on both sides. There was an endless stream of people and more than half of them were cultivators. Hey, that cultivator over there. Those below Jin Dan realm are forbidden from flying in the capital. Hurry and come down. Right then, a shout came from the city gate, interrupting Su Zimo's thoughts. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already arrived at the entrance of the capital on his sword. The guard below was referring to him. Even a vassal state like the Kingdom of Yan had all sorts of rules in the royal city, not to mention the city in front of him, which was the royal city of the Great Zhou dynasty. Su Zimo retracted his flying sword and landed at the city gate, following the crowd into the city. Su Zimo observed everything carefully. The guards on both sides of the capital would collect 10 spirit stones as entrance fee. Chi refinement warriors collected 10 inferior-grade spirit stones and foundation establishment cultivators would collect 10 middle-grade stones. As perfected being Dan, they could enter the city directly. That was the entrance of the capital was Zhou, the city, and Zhou was the entrance, the city was the city gate, One of the guards could tell that this was Su Zimo's first time in the capital and reminded him out of goodwill that there were many rules in the capital that he should pay attention to. If he were to break the rules, the lightest punishment would be expulsion from the capital. In serious cases, it would be normal for him to be beheaded in public. Su Zimo thanked him and entered the city. Upon arriving in the capital, Su Zimo nodded to himself. The spirit chi in the capital was clearly richer than outside. There should be a formation expert who set up a massive spirit gathering formation inside and outside the Great Zhou dynasty to achieve such an effect. Su Zimo was deep in thought as he traversed the long street paved with limestone. Even for perfected being Jin Dan, he could not achieve true anidia and had to eat. Only after entering the nascent soul realm would one possess supreme dermic powers and be able to consume rain and dew, absorb the essence of heaven and earth and the chi of the sun and moon to nourish one's body and achieve anidia. Therefore, in the capital of Great Zhou, the place with the most information was none other than the restaurants. Su Zimo raised his head and caught sight of a two-story restaurant not far away on his left. It was not even noon yet, but there were many guests inside, most of whom were cultivators. When Su Zimo entered the restaurant, he did not go to the private room on the second floor. Instead, he found a seat by the window on the first floor and sat down after ordering some food casually. Before long, the number of people on the first floor increased. Many cultivators gathered in twos and threes, discussing the recent happenings in the cultivation world. Su Zimo listened attentively while sipping his drink in no hurry. A long time later, a cultivator in the crowd suddenly said, "There's still more than 2 years until the sect competition. I think Misty Peak is in for it this time round." That's right. Because of such a huge change in Misty Peak, there will definitely be a lot of empty spots on the 4 ranking lists. Let's see who can get a spot. Isn't that so? I think many sects and cultivators have their eyes on the primordial ruins, thinking of getting their hands on treasures or something. By then, they'll definitely be able to shine in the sect competition. Just as everyone was discussing, a green-robed cultivator appeared out of nowhere and asked suddenly, "I heard that many foundation establishment cultivators of Misty Peak were surrounded and killed in Dongling Valley. What happened after that? How many disciples of Misty Peak managed to escape?" Many cultivators turned to look at Su Zimo, who asked the question with strange gazes. Su Zimo smiled embarrassedly. "I've been training outside and have just returned. This is the first time I've heard of this." "Oh." Many cultivators nodded in realization. Someone said, "Misty Peak suffered a huge blow from the encirclement this time round. From what I know, only a dozen or so of the foundation establishment cultivators of Misty Peak managed to escape. Out of the 3 legacy disciples, 2 of them died in that battle." At the end of the day, Su Zimo felt slightly better about the fact that they were not completely wiped out. However, he was still worried about the safety of little Fatty and Ling Ro. What about perfected being Jin Dan of Misty Peak? How are they? Su Zimo pondered for a moment and asked again. Even worse. The cultivator at the side shook his head. "I heard that there were 5 perfected being Jin Dan of Misty Peak. In the end, only one of them managed to escape and was severely injured. No one knows if he's dead or alive." Su Zimo sighed internally. As others had said, Misty Peak was dealt a huge blow this time round. Almost all of the top foundation establishment cultivators died in Dongling Valley. However, he did not know who the perfected being Jin Dan that managed to escape was. Was it Peak Master Wen Xian or Elder Yu? Right then, another cultivator said, "I heard that none of the Misty Peak disciples managed to escape this time round." In the end, something happened on the battlefield. A Misty Peak disciple chose to sacrifice himself in order to save his fellow sect mates and attracted more than half of the enemies away. Yes, I heard about that too. It's truly a pity for someone like that to die. The other person shook his head with a look of pity. Su Zimo realized that the Misty Peak disciple that the two of them were talking about should be him. However, there was a huge discrepancy between the situation and reality. Actually, that person might not be dead, Su Zimo said casually. Ha! One of them sneered. How could he have survived being hunted down by a few perfected being Jean Dan and being targeted by so many Foundation establishment cultivators? Another cultivator added, if he hadn't died, I'd have twisted my head off on the spot and let everyone kick it for fun. Chapter 248. In the northwest corner of the Great Zhou dynasty, there was a market named Yongxing City. All sorts of people from all walks of life gathered there and it was bustling. In a corner of Yongxing City, there was a group of people. There was an empty space in the middle of the crowd with a table. An old man with a Confucian crown and long robes leaned back in his chair with a rosy complexion and a long beard. The old man's left hand was pressed against a wooden block on the table and his right hand was waving a paper fan. He was talking eloquently and everyone around him was mesmerized by his words. His attire, the wooden block on the table and the folding fan in his hands were enough to tell that he was a storyteller who traveled among the commoners and specialized in telling stories of the supernatural and the legends of the fiend demons. The stories told by storytellers were mysterious, magnificent, and grotesque. To most mortals, they were very attractive. That battle was so intense that mountains collapsed and the ground cracked. The ground was filled with corpses and blood flowed like rivers. It was extremely tragic. The old man waved his paper fan and said loudly, "This human powerhouse made the void tremble when he took a step forward. With a loud roar, he could bring down the stars. With a flip of his hand, he could summon clouds and rain. Although the divine dragon was powerful enough to overturn rivers and seas and swallow the power of the sun and moon, it was still no match for this human." Everyone listened attentively. The battle lasted for 2 days and 2 nights. Finally, the divine dragon was slain by that person's sword. Countless blood splattered from the divine dragon's body. Many living beings could not dodge in time and were splashed by the blood. Unable to withstand the power of the divine dragon's bloodline, they exploded and died. Many people secretly clicked their tongues and let out cries of surprise. The old man was delighted when he saw everyone's reaction. He waved his folding fan gently and stroked his long beard, nodding with a smile. Foo-foo, right then, a stifled laugh sounded from outside the crowd. Those insubstantial things are only meant to fool mortals. What a joke. Who would have the stamina to fight for 2 days and 2 nights? You're even talking about the divine dragon as though you've seen it before. The person who spoke was a Foundation establishment cultivator. He happened to be passing by and stopped in his tracks to listen for a while before sneering coldly. In truth, true cultivators could not be bothered to listen to such things as they could easily tell the truth from the lies. When the old man saw that he was exposed, he could not help but blush as though he was enraged. Straightening his neck, he asked, "How do you know that I've never seen it before?" "Oh?" The Foundation establishment cultivator glanced at the old man and sneered, "You don't have any spirit chi in your body. You're not a cultivator. I'd like to ask you, where did you see the divine dragon?" Through the spirit of life, he could tell that the old man was an ordinary mortal. The moment the old man heard that the other party was a cultivator, he immediately lost his imposing manner. He avoided the other party's gaze and retracted his neck. He muttered in a low voice, "Anyway, I've seen him before." The Foundation establishment cultivator Kurov Life pursed his lips and sneered of life cultivators of life. Not far away, there was a man in a gray robe. He was slightly plump and had a white face without a beard. He also held a folding fan in his hand and was walking towards them. "Storyteller, please continue." Someone couldn't wait any longer and urged from the side. Sweeping his gaze, the old man caught sight of the newcomer and the wooden block in his hands fell with a crisp thud. If you want to know what happened, listen to the next chapter. Keeping the wooden block, the old man closed his paper fan and waved his hand. Let's disperse. I'll tell you another day. TSK. The crowd hissed. When they saw the old man stand up and leave, the crowd did not linger and dispersed as well. The old man entered the crowd and disappeared in a few steps. In an empty corner, the old man met with a gray-robed cultivator. Old man, I failed. I didn't succeed. The gray-robed cultivator had an unlucky expression. It was Lin Xuanji who had just escaped from the primordial ruin. The old man twirled his 3 strands of long beard with an unfathomable look. He said with a smile, I've already expected this. F***CK. When Lin Xuanji heard that, he jumped up in anger. Old man, you're so ruthless. You've already divined it and yet you still sent me to that lousy place. I almost lost my life. What do you know? The old man replied calmly, the divination I divined shows that you'll be fine on this trip. Although you're destined to fail, it's not a wasted trip. Is that so? Lin Xuanji asked through gritted teeth. Of course. My divination won't be wrong, the old man was confident. Lin Xuanji could not hold it in any longer and shouted, I didn't even get anything. I only ate some egg juice and it was left behind by a dog. What egg juice? What dog? The old man was stunned after being sprayed with saliva. Lin Xuanji recounted everything that happened in the dragon's lair of the primordial ruin in detail. You ate the dragon's egg? You're sick. The old man was so angry that he shuddered. Raising his palm, he slapped Lin Xuanji viciously. Hey! Don't hit me, it wasn't me, it was that Su Zimo and a dog. Lin Xuanji dodged repeatedly but to no avail. With a smack, a bright red handprint appeared on his left cheek. Old man, I used the minor transference talisman as well. Piak! Without another word, the old man slapped him once more. A handprint appeared on Lin Xuanji's right cheek as well and refused to fade. The old man stroked his beard and frowned. That doesn't make sense. The divination shouldn't be wrong and your trip shouldn't have been in vain. Could it be that the divination is referring to that Su Zimo? Right, old man, this person has some tricks up his sleeves. I can't divine his background and fortune, Lin Xuanji said. There's such a thing. An obscure ripple spread out from the old man's glabella and enveloped the entire capital instantly. Before long, he found Su Zimo in a restaurant. A soft look appeared in the old man's eyes and dissipated rapidly, turning into a hazy gray mist. The old man opened his palm and divined. As time passed by, the old man's frown deepened and his expression turned grimmer while his face turned paler. Given the old man's cultivation realm, he could divine a foundation establishment cultivator in the blink of an eye. But now, 2 hours had passed. Lin Xuanji held his breath at the side and waited silently, afraid that he would disturb the old man. After another hour, the old man shuddered and grunted dully. The soft look in his eyes dissipated and was replaced with streaks of blood. It was frightening. Old man, how are you? Lin Xuanji knew that this was the result of forceful divinations. Some people had unique destinies and if they were forcefully divined and did not stop in time, it was normal for them to go blind. In more serious cases, bad luck might even befall them. It's fine, the old man waved it off and heaved a long sigh of relief. This lad's destiny was ordinary and initially, there was nothing special about it. However, an expert defied the heavens and changed his destiny, causing it to change drastically. Even I can't divine it anymore. Ah! Lin Xuanji's eyes widened in disbelief. Defied the heavens and changed his destiny? He knew the weight of the words defied the heavens and changed one's destiny, even the old man before him could not do it. Right then, the old man's expression changed and his eyes shone brightly. Chapter 249. Noticing the strange expression on the old man's face, Lin Xuanji could not help but ask, "Old man, what happened? You said that the three of you ate that dragon egg?" The old man was expressionless and asked instead of answering. Stunned for a moment, Lin Xuanji shook his head hurriedly. "I only ate a little bit of egg juice. That man and beast ate almost everything. Both of them ate so much that their mouths were glowing and they couldn't hold it in even if they wanted to." "A little bit?" The old man sneered, "Even if you ate a single drop, don't think about denying it. Do you think that dragon eggs are that delicious? Do you think you can just leave after you've eaten your fill?" "Old man, what do you mean by that? Don't scare me. A dragon has come knocking on our door." "Ah! Stay here and don't leave the city." As soon as the old man finished speaking, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared on the spot. Outside the city gates, a tall woman in green armor walked towards the city gates with a cold expression. She exuded a chilling aura and her eyes were filled with killing intent. The armor on the man's body was extremely unique and resembled green fish scales that were connected perfectly. The closer she was to the city gates, the denser the crowd became. When the green-armored woman arrived, she had no intention of slowing down as she squeezed through the crowd and headed straight for the city gates. "What are you squeezing for? Do you have a death wish?" A Foundation establishment cultivator at the front turned around and glared at the green-armored woman. He placed his hand in his storage bag with a threatening look in his eyes. In the royal city, apart from some special areas, killing and fighting were prohibited. However, this was outside the capital after all, and the guards would not interfere if a fight were to break out. Against the threat of the Foundation establishment cultivator, the green-armored woman continued walking expressionlessly without even pausing. The Foundation establishment cultivator opposite frowned and used his spirit-peering art to check the green-armored woman's body. However, he did not find any trace of spirit chi. Most importantly, the green-armored woman did not have a storage bag on her. That meant that she was only a mortal. "You don't know what's good for you." The Foundation establishment cultivator was relieved and cursed. He withdrew a flying sword from his storage bag and injected spirit energy into it. Whoosh! 2 spirit patterns lit up on the sword. It was a middle-grade flying sword. "Quick!" The Foundation establishment cultivator scolded softly, and his flying sword pierced towards the azure-armored woman's forehead. The surrounding crowd had already dispersed, afraid that they would be implicated. The green-armored woman ignored the flying sword and continued to walk forward. The Foundation establishment cultivator on the other side sneered in his heart as a sinister look flashed across his eyes. Clang! When the flying sword struck the green-armored woman's glabella, it was actually repelled, emitting the sound of metal clashing. The Foundation establishment cultivator's expression changed. The onlookers were also dumbfounded. A mid-grade flying sword couldn't even pierce through his body. What was his cultivation level? At this moment, the green-armored woman had already arrived in front of him. Suddenly, she stretched out her arm and extended a slender finger, lightly tapping the Foundation establishment cultivator's head. The Foundation establishment cultivator could clearly see the green-armored woman's finger pointing at him, but he felt that he couldn't move at all. He couldn't dodge it no matter how hard he tried. Puff! A crisp sound rang out. The azure-armored woman retracted her hand. There was a bloody hole in the Foundation establishment cultivator's head and blood was gushing out. The man's eyes dimmed, and he fell to the ground with a thud, dying on the spot. Everyone was in an uproar when they saw that. The guards at the city gates initially had the mentality of watching the show. But now, they were suddenly nervous, as though they were facing a formidable enemy. Although the guards did not have high cultivation realms, they had seen too many people after guarding the city gates all year round. They could sense an extremely dangerous aura coming from the green-armored woman. Halt! Report your name, which sect are you from and which country are you from? One of the guards shouted. The green-armored woman continued walking forward expressionlessly. It was as though there was nothing and no one in the world that could stop her. The expressions of the guards changed as they withdrew their flying swords from their storage bags, prepared to attack. "Fellow Daoist, you've crossed the line." Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. The guards felt their vision blur as an old man in long robes with a Confucian hairstyle appeared before them. Strangely enough, the green-armored woman actually stopped in her tracks after the old man appeared, and a hint of wariness flashed through her eyes. The old man said indifferently, "Go back. You're trying to stop me." The green-armored woman opened her mouth and narrowed her eyes. An ancient aura began to exude from her body, as strong and dignified as a divine being that was irresistible. Shrouded by that aura, everyone in the surroundings, be it mortals or cultivators, felt a sense of reverence that made them want to kneel on the ground and prostrate in worship. Roar! Suddenly, the green-armored woman opened her mouth and let out a deafening roar from the depths of her throat that pierced through metal and rocks. Dragon roar! Poof! 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 The people closest to the green-armored woman exploded instantly, turning into blood mists. Clang! Clang! The flying swords in the hands of many guards fell as they hugged their heads with both hands with pained expressions. Blood was already seeping out of their ears. "Beast, how dare you act rashly in front of me?" The old man shouted loudly. His voice was loud and clear like a great bell. It contained a powerful force and instantly interrupted the dragon roar that resounded through the world. If not for the old man's voice, the hundreds of people outside the city gates would have died. Everyone snapped out of their stupor and panted heavily. Just now, they felt as though they had just taken a trip to the gates of hell and were still traumatized. Unknowingly, a folding fan appeared in the old man's hands. In a flash, the old man closed in on the green-armored woman and swung the folding fan in his hands, smashing it down on her face. Boom! The green-armored woman stomped on the ground, causing mud to fly everywhere. She sped backwards and dodged the old man's folding fan. In midair, the green-armored woman's body expanded continuously. Chapter 250. Humph! Against the incoming scorching dragon flames, the old man's expression did not change as he harumphed coldly. With a flick of his wrist, he opened his folding fan and released an incomparably resplendent golden light. The folding fan in the old man's hands seemed to have transformed into a blazing sun, emitting a bedazzling golden light. Instantly, all the spectators in the capital, be it cultivators or mortals, felt a piercing pain in their eyes. Their vision was drowned by the endless light and they were momentarily blinded. The crowd outside the capital was the closest to the battlefield and cried out in pain. Instinctively, they tilted their heads and closed their eyes as tears streamed down their faces. Roar! The divine dragon seemed to have recognized the folding fan in the old man's hands as it let out a deep growl with a wary look in its eyes. Swash! Wielding the folding fan, the old man swiped forward. The incoming green dragon flames were like a piece of cloth that was split in the middle by the folding fan and slid to the sides. Almost instantly, the old man arrived before the divine dragon. The divine dragon raised its head and straightened its body, reaching out with a pair of gigantic dragon claws to grab the old man viciously. The old man's expression did not change and he did not dodge or retreat. Instead, he simply extended his arm and clenched his fist, punching towards the incoming dragon claws. Bang! There was a deafening bang. Many cultivators outside the capital could not withstand it and fainted on the spot. The entire monarch city trembled slightly under the reverberation of this voice. A series of cracks appeared in the void at the center of the collision. It was pitch black within and emitted a chilling aura that was frightening. Even the void was cracking. The old man's seemingly small body remained motionless in midair. On the other hand, the divine dragon was the one that was pushed back. After that punch, the old man swept the folding fan in his hands forward and sliced across the divine dragon's body with an ear-piercing sound. It was as though metal was being sliced across a mirror, causing one's teeth to ache. A flash of blood appeared. A stream of dragon blood splattered and dyed the skies red. A gigantic gash appeared on the side of the dragon's body. The dragon's scales had already been scraped off, revealing the scarlet flesh within. With a tragic cry, the divine dragon soared into the air and soared above the 9 firmaments. The old man held the folding fan in one hand and placed the other behind his back. He looked at the divine dragon in the clouds indifferently without giving chase. The divine dragon turned around and glared at the old man. His eyes were filled with murderous intent and unwillingness. However, it was clearly aware that if it continued to deal with this old man, then it was very likely that it would be buried here. Roar! The divine dragon let out a long roar into the sky. Riding on the clouds, it sped into the distance and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. After the divine dragon escaped, the old man closed his folding fan but did not leave immediately. The old man's gaze landed on a spot not far away. There was nothing there, but the old man continued to stare at it, a hint of warning in his eyes. After a long time, the old man withdrew his gaze and heaved a sigh of relief. With a wave of his sleeve, he vanished. Within the capital, many cultivators only reacted to the situation a long time after the old man disappeared, bursting into a commotion. Did you guys see that? It's actually a divine dragon. So this kind of ancient creature really does exist in this world. Now that I've seen it today, I have no regrets in this life. This divine dragon's aura is too terrifying. Even from so far away, I feel a sense of trepidation, as though I could die at any moment. Many cultivators gathered together with excited expressions as they discussed spiritedly. Be it Foundation Establishment cultivators or perfected Gene Dan, these cultivators might not even get to see the true appearance of dragons in their entire lives. In fact, most of the cultivators were like Su Zimo and thought that the divine dragon was merely an illusory legend that was conjectured by some people. How could there be such a powerful and terrifying living being in Tianhuang mainland? But now that everyone saw it with their own eyes, they truly felt that the divine dragon outside the capital was far stronger than they had imagined and was even more terrifying than the legends. Just who was it that was able to stop such a powerful existence? The divine dragon was already so strong. Just now, what cultivation realm was the person who stopped it? I don't know. I can't see clearly. Everyone shook their heads. This great battle, everyone saw it clearly and vividly. Everyone saw the divine dragon coiling in midair as well. However, no one saw the person who was fighting against the divine dragon clearly. A perfected Gene Dan said hesitantly, that person was shrouded in a layer of mist the entire time and couldn't be seen clearly. He seemed to be a middle-aged man. Where did that divine dragon come from? Why is it here? I'm not sure. I have a feeling that something big is going to happen in the Tianhuang mainland north region. Although Su Zimo looked calm on the surface when he heard the discussions around him, his heart was in turmoil. Nobody knew the background of the divine dragon better than him. This divine dragon was the one he saw in the primordial ruin. Naturally, his motive for coming here was self-evident as well. It was to hunt them down. Su Zimo had long known that the moment they ate the dragon egg, they would form an irreconcilable feud with the divine dragon and all dragons. That was the reason why he said that Night Spirit was in trouble. However, Su Zimo had not expected that the divine dragon would be able to find its way here even after they used the minor transference talisman to escape from the primordial ruin. If not for that mysterious expert today, he and Night Spirit would most likely have died by now. How did it find its way here? The minor transference talisman was used for spatial teleportation. Perhaps the divine dragon could determine the general direction given its capabilities. However, how did it determine that he and Night Spirit were in the capital of Great Zhou so accurately? This time round, the divine dragon was indeed repelled by a mysterious expert. However, there was no way that mysterious expert could appear around Su Zimo at any time. Only the heavens knew where that person came from, what he looked like and what his background was. If the divine dragon were to come knocking the next time, who would be able to save him and Night Spirit? Su Zimo's heart was shrouded in a layer of haze. At the center of the capital stood a majestic palace that occupied a huge area. It was the emperor's palace. Outside the palace stood a dense crowd of black-armored soldiers. Every single one of them was a Foundation establishment cultivator, and there were a total of 10,000 of them. All of them knelt on one knee in an orderly formation in a disciplined manner. At the entrance of the palace stood a middle-aged man in yellow robes. His face was chiseled and his gaze was blazing. He exuded a dignified aura that came from someone who had been in a high position for a long time. The yellow-robed man's bronze skin added a hint of bloodlust and killing intent to his face. This was the emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty. He was in charge of thousands of kilometers of territory and ruled over the feudal vassals with a might that shook the world. The yellow-robed man asked, "Everyone, what do you think?" "Your Majesty, that person is extremely strong and should be one of the top existences in Tianhuang mainland. He's definitely not someone of the Great Zhou dynasty." Behind the yellow-robed man, a perfected Jin Dan said slowly. "Perfected Lord Mingzai, did you manage to catch a glimpse of that expert's appearance?" The yellow-robed man glanced sideways and asked with a nod. The fact that he was addressed as a perfected lord meant that this person was already at nascent soul realm. "I didn't manage to catch a clear glimpse either," perfected Lord Mingzai shook his head. "Since that person isn't willing to reveal his identity, let's not investigate further lest we incur his wrath and get ourselves killed." The yellow-robed man nodded and looked into the distance, murmuring softly, "With the appearance of the dragons, is the world truly about to descend into chaos?" You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.